evening and welcome to the Ashland Board of Selectmen meeting for February 21st. Thanks to our friends at WACA-TV for televising this. Is there anyone in the room that's recording other than them that wishes to identify yourself?
Hi.
Okay, thank you. I call this meeting to order, and I will lead with the Pledge of Allegiance. I understand we volunteer. Mr. Powderly, would you come forward and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? He stood way in the back, but didn't do him any good. That's good, Bob.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. Good. Vision statement. Carl, would you like to read the vision statement?
Sure. The town of Ashland will be a prosperous and fiscally sound community with a full range of housing, business, cultural, educational, and recreational opportunities in a safe and attractive environment for residents and visitors.
And Steve, would you like to read the mission statement?
Sure. Mission statement: the Ashland Board of Selectmen is dedicated to promoting responsible fiscal management, advocating for sustainable development and growth, and providing excellent municipal services which will enhance the quality of life in our diverse community. The Ashland Board of Selectmen is committed to providing clear goals and objectives for town management and creating effective engagement and public participation with residents, state legislators, and other elected officials in order to achieve our mission.
Thank you, Steve. You're welcome. Before we get started with the meeting proper, I just have a short statement I'd like to make. As we are all aware, last week the small community of Parkland, Florida experienced an unspeakable tragedy. The shooting death of 15 students and teachers and the wounding of 17 others at their high school. As municipal officials, we experience this tragedy not only as fellow human beings and parents, but also as public officials charged with the safety of our own community. I think I speak for the entire board when I say that we send the community of Parkland our sympathies, thoughts, and prayers, but that alone is not enough. As the students themselves have told us, this is a moral question. It is adults who are responsible for their safety and who must take action. I think we are all in agreement that concrete actions must be taken, especially on a national level, to prevent further horrible events like this. And I'll speak a little bit more of this in my board report. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Rob.
So the first item on the agenda is board reorganization. And I think one of our members is not here, so and he actually asked that we put it off till he returned. So I think unless people object, that we'll put on the board reorganization on the agenda for the next meeting. Until then, I'll continue as vice chair in an acting capacity. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you. So, citizens' participation.
Okay. Good evening,
Good evening, Mark.
and good read there, Mr. Vice Chair, in that, about Parkland.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm here for a different reason, and I'm on the agenda for later on, so I'm not gonna say, well, it's that one.
Okay.
Sometimes in this town, you just don't give thanks when thanks is needed, or appreciation when appreciation is needed. At my house at 49 Hawthorne Road last week, I give both thanks and appreciation to the fire department and the ambulatory people that helped my dad, who had an episode, had a couple of days of a fever, flu, and stuff like that, and had a lightheadedness and fell, and I tried to pick him up, and I couldn't do it. So I called emergency. Ended up going to the hospital. Heart machines, blood pressure was up, skip heartbeats and stuff like that. He was in the hospital for over a week. So what he had, he is now out of the hospital as of yesterday. He's in rehabilitation as of today, but he is far from being well. He had a viral infection with the fever and flu combined. And he is kind of not all there, but he is coherent. And we're fighting everything that goes with it. People just don't say thank you, appreciation to the red, blue, and white team. I'm saying that to the Board of Health too, because it's health that is everything. And when you see it in front of you, it's all. So with that, I'm thanking them in public. And I know on the agenda for a member, Board of the Health member, I'm on that list. And I sent in a pre-appointment letter. Mr. Town Manager, did you get it?
Yes, we got your town pick form.
And you get the little letter I sent out after? The little thing?
Expressing your interest?
Yes.
Yes.
Some of that goes with it, and some it had a little bit of an extra, but it still has the same sentiments.
Yeah, we got
Okay.
that, Mark.
Okay.
So that's what you want to talk about when we.
I know,
come
I'm
to
just
you.
saying that, thank you to the fire department, ambulatory people, but it's gonna be a long way to recovery, but he is still on this earth, breathing and carrying on.
Glad to hear it,
Good.
thanks.
Yeah. Well, give our best to your father.
All right, anyone else? Okay, Kate, go ahead.
Catherine Jerzyk, 11 Rodman Road. About a month ago, I was here requesting that the board considers a process for civic engagement.
Yes.
And I know everybody's busy, and I know there's lots of things going on. And I just, since I haven't really seen anything specific, I just wanted to reiterate that I don't think there's anything more important for our town government, the way our town government functions. And I think, particularly like the upcoming town meeting, there's some pretty big things, and I don't want this to be topical or just for me, but I'm just giving you examples to make it clear where I'm coming from. Maybe they're almost too big to discuss at town meeting floor in any meaningful way. And the town managers forum that we've typically had a week before is really, I think, inadequate as well for some of these things. And I think if you ask me right now, without enough information, I tend to just say no, because I don't want to vote for something I don't understand. And I don't think I'm unique in that. So I think this is a particular time for these particular issues, why I'm asking again, and just overall, I do feel it's really important. And then maybe a simpler example, and again, this isn't about my neighborhood or me, but I want you to know there are real things. It's not me just sitting up at night thinking how I can make my town better, even though I do that too. Like my neighbor's having trouble with the dumpsters again at Market Basket. She regularly goes over and deals with them, and they regularly try, but we have our new noise bylaw, and I don't think there's really a path for her to get help here. And so, again, these are just examples. They're not the purpose of my request. They're just giving you. So hopefully that didn't fall off your radar screen. Thank
No,
you.
thank you, Kate, for the
Thank you.
reminder.
Can I respond to
Sure.
that? Kate, I think there is a mechanism for reporting those noise complaints. And I think that if it's not followed through on, that the person that's making the complaint should come to the Board of Selectmen so that we make sure that that stuff works. That's number one. Number two, I think that we all heard you the last time you came. And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but we're a little bit ahead of where we usually are in preparing for town meeting this year. And maybe I just cursed everything, but hopefully not. We did that on purpose so that we would have time to fully flesh out some of the things that we're going to discuss in those community-type settings that you're talking about. So hopefully that will happen with some of these things. We fully intend to do that. And the nice thing is it's the middle of February, not the middle of April. So we have a little bit of time to do that, and hopefully we will be successful in doing that.
Any other comments on
Just,
that?
just to say, we are also talking about other ways besides the town managers forums to get the information out. So if you have ideas, but we're also talking about some other ways as well.
And I do want to note that we do have a lot of things on the agenda coming up for town meeting and the town election, so that is challenging, and we should probably look at that schedule as well. Steve?
Yeah, good evening, Steve Morgan. That's a great intro, because the reason I got up for citizens' participation tonight is that I don't want to see, for yet an additional town meeting, the same thing happen that's happened to me in the past several town meetings, which is that for the few months leading into the town meeting, I asked for warrant articles so that I can inform myself of what's going to be brought to town meeting. And then I make public documents requests, and I don't get them on time. And so we end up having multiple discussions here at the Board of Selectmen on draft warrant articles, and they're never provided to the public, even people like myself who ask for them. So when I look tonight, before coming down to the meeting, I note that this board hasn't approved minutes and posted its documents and lists since early December. So you're already several months behind, maybe not far enough to be subjected to an open meeting complaint yet, but certainly far enough that the documents that you've been reviewing are not available to the public. And so as a constructive suggestion, I would suggest that even if you don't get your minutes done, the draft warrant articles and documents that are used in these meetings are provided to the public up on the website so they can look. I'd like to see them. I'd like to not have to be in the newspaper about making public documents requests to get copies of the warrant articles that you all are reviewing at the table. And I assume there's a set here tonight because it's on the agenda under old business. So that's my suggestion. That's the reason that
To
I'm
post,
commenting.
I don't know, does anybody want to respond to that, Michael, the details of that?
No, I don't think it needs.
I mean, I think we,
That input.
yeah, I think we make effort to make documents as public as soon as we can and for people to look at, and they should be posted on the website in a timely.
So, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair, do I need to make a documents request to see the warrant articles from tonight's meeting? Under the law, you have to get them to me in 10 days. If I ask for them tomorrow, you'll have to get them to
Well,
me in 10 days.
procedurally,
Can
let
you,
me
can
just-
you just provide them to the
Well, I
public?
just have, procedurally, what do we, we have them on our board packet, and we'll review them tonight,
Yeah,
and
those are
then,
usually filed with the town clerk, so.
Yes, but we usually put them up as the backup to the minute meeting, the
The
meeting
minutes.
minutes
Right.
when they're approved.
Which are more than 2 months late.
well, we're not that, so I don't, does anybody,
So, I mean, I think
We're not
we've,
that late, are we?
I think we go above and
January.
beyond what is required by law. I agree. I don't think that should necessarily be the standard by which we,
well,
hold
probably,
ourselves to.
I don't even, unless there's people are thinking we should hold the warrant article list or the draft, it's a draft list, right?
And
So if we can
it'll
put it on
be,
the
it'll be
website,
part of the,
yeah,
it'll be part of the,
It's a warrant tracker,
backup.
isn't it?
Yeah, yep.
yeah, so we could put it out there, hopefully.
Well, thank you. I won't take any more of your time.
Okay.
I will have to obviously make the request. Thank you.
Good evening, Judith Margulies,
Hey, Judy.
53 America Boulevard. I wasn't planning to get up to speak, but I wanted to piggyback on other comments that have been made. Concerning the noise, this morning I was woken, I want to say it was just a little bit, maybe 15 minutes to 6 a.m. That's a regular problem at Village of Americas. When I have called, I have not gotten adequate response from the police department. But I did want to clarify that although I find it particularly disconcerting that the Board of Health doesn't take up noise concerns, but Mass General Law does give the Board of Health jurisdiction over noise. And I just wanted to say that the Board of Health is one avenue to file a complaint and insist that there be some address to it. What this was going on this morning was 15 minutes of one of those construction bins, those very large dumpster bins. They had to back up, beep, beep, beep. They had to pick it up. They had to take it out. They had to replace it. And all of that lasted about 15 minutes, and it was very loud. It abuts residential homes within maybe 100 feet at the most. That's what was this morning, and that is typical. And when I have called the police department over the last 2 years, there has not been adequate response. Thank you.
Anybody want to respond? Okay. All right, thank you, Judith. Okay. All right, so it's time for the next item on the agenda is the joint meeting with the Board of Health, the selection of a Board of Health member. So we have, 3 people have, fill out the talent bank forms, apply to be appointed to the Board of Health on an interim basis till the election.
Do you want to invite the Board of Health to join us, or?
Yeah, well, I was gonna get to that, but,
Okay.
and I also wanted to say that we had one withdrawal, so some folks might think Kitty Mahoney is withdrawn. So the 3 candidates are Mark Dassoni, Chris Danielle, and Stephen Morgan. So, can I ask the Board of Health members to come up here, that are here in the audience, and we should pull up some chairs for you.
Chair up there, Ron. Why don't you just pull up some of the front chairs there?
Okay. So in terms of process, I guess we will, unless someone will interview each in turn, give them a short.
Well, I think probably the
Oh,
Board
I'm
of Health
sorry,
needs
yeah.
to open.
In their meeting.
Open.
Sorry, I'd like to call Board of Health concurrent with the Board of Selectmen meeting to select a candidate for filling a vacancy on our board.
All set. So I think, unless someone has other suggestions, we'll just interview each one in turn. They'll come up to the podium here and tell a little bit about, why they want to be on it. So, Mark, why don't you want to go first? We have Chris.
Okay, yes, Mark Tassoni. I'll let the board begin, and how you want me to open.
Well, do you have a short statement you want to make? And
A
then
short
we'll
statement
ask any
is,
questions.
Yes, is that I would like to try to, like I did the first time when we had the Charlie Legassi left, that seat was open, and so I'm trying again to be in that temp seat. But only as an alternate, because I know that now it's only, there's 2 other people. There's one that's gonna put the name on the ballot, and if I get myself elected, I would like to be as a citizen, person, listener, and carry on with the good smoothness that the Board of Health is going on right now at present time. And I would like to just be there to continue the positive going forth.
All right, thank you, Mark. Any questions for Mark from board members? Sorry, go ahead.
Have you considered putting your name on the ballot at all?
What I did last year was, last time was the same example, the telebank form, and then come up being interviewed. This was before the first election where 2 other people got elected to the seats. And I was not put on because there were other good people that came. One of the good ones is not here tonight, so I'm a little more stronger for it.
I want to have a follow-up to that.
Sure.
So, and I'm going to ask the same question to everybody. If appointed, would you run? And if you're not appointed, would you consider running for the Board of Health? Because one of the things we find sometimes in town is there's no contested race. So would you still consider running if you weren't appointed?
I would put that in the way of saying, once these meetings are publicly home seen, I would let the people say yes or no to a write-in as an alternate.
Why not just get the signatures and run? If you would
Because
be considered for a write-in, why not just put your name on
Because
the
I believe
ballot?
it's the town's decision, see how the town is run, not by just one member, how they're doing.
Okay,
All right,
thank you.
thanks, Mark. Steve?
So, Mark, I'm asking the same question to all the candidates as well, and I think, for me, there's kind of a dual criteria here. One is experience that lends itself well to being on a Board of Health. And number 2, the criteria of being able to work in a collaborative, cooperative, and supportive environment and work together on a board and committee. So talk a little bit about that, how you feel that you're, I think it's clear that you don't have necessarily direct experience in health-related things, but, you know, how might you benefit the board by the criteria of being collaborative, cooperative, and supportive?
Okay, the first word would be collaborative, and supportive is two of the same meanings to me. That's called teamwork and listening with each other, and not overbearing with other voices trying to say what their point is without actually going through a team board frame. It's just being the one unit as to work together, to be together, collaborative and supportive. What was the third one?
Well, it was, I think you get the gist of it. I mean, it's working within a committee environment and working, you know, to better and to improve and to, you know, work on behalf of the community.
And since I've been around the Board of Health itself, per se, the last two and a half years, I've seen the positive, but I've seen way too much circus life, and I want to see the positives prevail. And that's what I want to be part of,
Okay.
to go ahead.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
For coming forward. Okay. Now we'll go to the next person.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
And just a point of information, if I understand the electoral, there's two people have taken out papers for the 3-year terms on the Board of Health, and no one has taken out papers for the 2-year term, which was formerly held by Mary Mortensen.
It's
One
one,
year,
I believe.
1 year term.
1 year,
1 year.
oh, it's a 1-year term, right. So,
March 27th.
27th to get
To have
the-
your papers, the
in.
signatures done and in and certified.
Right. So if anybody's thinking about it, please come down and, you know, make a decision soon. Okay, so the next person, we'll do Chris next. Chris Danielle, you want to come up?
Good evening, Board of Health and Board of Selectmen and citizens that are in attendance and at home. I've taken, over the last, I would say, 4 or 5 years, an increasingly active interest in learning about the town and town politics and the people that run the town and all the committees, and getting more involved in different things, such as the farmer's market last year. I was a volunteer and showing up at meetings and town meetings and elections. And the last couple times I've appeared before this podium, whether it be at Board of Selectmen meetings or Board of Health meetings, it was because there was a lot of turmoil and distress and difficult things. And I just feel it's time for that to be in the past. The Board of Health is a really important board. It's something I'm really passionate about. And I want to take the 20 years of experience I have in working in public higher education, most of it with health education. I've also worked as a union representative. I've worked on the leadership of the local union chapter. I've worked in the lay leadership of my church. So I've worked on committees and in groups where there are people that have very different thoughts and opinions about things, that yet we're all able to get along and have civil discussion and civil conversation, and at the end of the day, do what's best in the interest of what our goal is. And it's just, when I saw this temporary position open up, I thought to myself, and I'll answer Yolanda's question now, I've not only pulled papers, but I've submitted them and I'm certified. I will be on the ballot in May for a
the-
3-year seat.
For a 3-year seat. Okay.
For the Board of Health. So if the citizens are kind enough to elect me in, this would give me a chance to start and get some on-the-job experience, get to build relationships with the people that are remaining on the board, and start from the ground up. So that's my purpose here.
Questions for?
I have a question, but it's a procedural question. If Chris is appointed to Mary's position, and then that has 1 year left in it, does he then have to run for the 1-year seat because he's been appointed
No.
to
No.
fill that?
He can run for either seat.
You can run for
Okay.
this.
Yeah, it'll be vacant as of the election.
Right.
The
If
seat
no
is
one,
there.
if no one pulls for the 1-year seat, then
Yeah.
it would be empty.
Okay.
So you've answered, I wrote 3 questions down and you've answered some of them. What do you really feel that you will add to the Board of Health by becoming, if we appoint you today?
Hopefully a fresh perspective. someone that hasn't been on the board for a very long time, and someone that brings the perspective of a citizen of the town, and someone that's just really concerned about it. And aside from that, again, as I mentioned earlier, I do have 20 years in public higher education, and before that, you know, some leadership experience in conflict resolution and things that I think are relevant to the board today.
Okay.
So I think that the experience and the passion, along with people that I think are very passionate about the topics as well, I think that we can work together.
Great,
Thank you.
Steve?
So Chris, you mentioned earlier about your years of work in higher ed, and then you mentioned health education specifically. Expand on that a little bit.
Sure thing.
And then I think you did answer, for the most part, my question about the ability to be collaborative, cooperative, and supportive. You might want to expand on that a little bit as well.
Sure. I work at Mass Bay Community College. That's where I've been for 20 years. And one of the cornerstone programs there are the health sciences programs. And they've been housed in the Framingham campus where I've been for the last couple of decades. And I've built training programs specifically designed for health educators, people that, when HIPAA became a very relevant thing, all the instructors had to sign waivers, and the students in the classes, the students in the nursing programs and allied health programs all had to be trained in what HIPAA was and take a test. So I developed the training materials for that and the test. So while I have no expertise necessarily as a health professional, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I did get a first aid merit badge once. I've been around the people, and I think that another advantage of that too is those people that I've worked with for all those years can be a resource to me. If we're discussing a topic in public health that maybe some of us on the board don't have as much experience with, I can get advice and you know, tap into those resources, those colleagues, and get information that might help us discuss a topic.
Thank you.
Great, thank
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chris. Any other questions for Chris?
I'm sure I fell into your shoes when I started running this for Board of Health, and I did not know anything about it. I could read and then learn more and then come back. I'm sure you're capable of that too. Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Anything else? Anybody else? All right, thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
Steve Morgan?
Evening. So, as I'm sure you Board of Health knows, perhaps the BOS does not know, but I've been attending the Board of Health meetings now for about two and a half years. Took an interest in it because I took an interest in the way the town was operating and the disclosure and the openness the town was operating or not operating in. And there were a lot of concerns. And, you know, I have an interest in public health. I work in public health. I've worked as an engineer. I have a degree from Worcester Polytech. I've been doing projects in engineering. The field that I work in is primarily life sciences. I work doing quality work where patient health is important. Everything is done to ensure the health of people, whether it's engineering or manufacturing. I personally make a living as a project manager working for leading life sciences companies. And that's what I do for a living. So it's very important to me how things work, and that, you know, public health is important. In addition to my professional work, I've done residential and commercial projects where I've had to deal with Board of Health and deal with regulations and be exposed to things that are a part of the operations of towns. And although I appreciate that some people may think that some of the things that I've done in asking for documentation or holding people accountable have perhaps not been the way they would like it done, I'm not an adversarial person. You know, I wasn't the one who decided to disband the Capital Committee and take it over for myself as a town manager, you know. I'm the one
Excuse me,
who-
I
I'm
think
the-
that
I'm the
you're
one-
being adversarial now,
Well,
Mr. Morgan, so
okay.
you want to get back on track.
I believe I'm entitled to speak my mind, unless you're cutting me short, Mr. Chair. I have the floor.
But-
And so I understand certain people may disagree, and I expect you'll probably vote against me. And so, you know, what I'm interested in is I'm interested in finding an appropriate way to help the town. I thought that was to apply my expertise in the capital setting. The town has chosen not to follow those procedures and approaches. And so I was looking for something else to contribute. And this is an area where I have a great deal of experience. I do work with my clients on a very collaborative basis. I successfully make a living doing so. And I am, frankly, in some cases, a little disappointed by the lack of collaboration of the town. And I appreciate some comments from some of the speakers about the need for more collaboration. I hope more documentation is forthcoming and the people work better together. I know Mr. Mitchell and I had some discussion about that a couple years ago, so it's not a new point for me. So I saw this role as an appropriate role I could contribute to. It's an opening that made some sense to me. Looking around, I didn't feel like I wanted to run for one of your seats, and so I felt that this was a reasonable place to go next, given the involvement I've had with the Board of Health and my observations of what's going on with the Board of Health and how it isn't serving the town. One thing that was particularly of concern to me that I've brought to members is the lack of involvement with the Massachusetts Sanitary Code. You know, this is an area which is a primary responsibility of the Board of Health. Ashland has a lot of rental units, and yet not a minute has gone on in 2.5 years about the sanitary code and ensuring that you have safe apartments and safe landlord-tenant situations in town. I think that's an important thing, equally as important to many of the other things the Board of Health does. And so these are topics that, when I brought them forward, I would have expected people would have, you know, put them on a list and put a little bit of time on an agenda. Unfortunately, that board has been too busy with its agendas arguing than actually working their work. And, you know, I have taken the time to stay with the discussion, to continue to ask for information and continue to follow up and not walk away from those meetings. And I think, you know, you certainly would find in me someone who is willing to do the job and to work with people to get the job done and not to create conflict. The goal is not conflict. Asking people to follow a rule is not conflict. It's only when people refuse. And then you have to take additional steps, and then they attack you in the newspaper. That's not me. That's not how I live in my business and how I do business with my clients. You know, I'm not out with adversarial relationships. I work in some of the most collaborative environments in existence here in Massachusetts in life sciences. Everything is done in a collaborative way with the focus on patients. That's how we work in my professional area. And I'm, as you all know, I'm a little disappointed in some of how it works here in town. I'd like to see that improve. So if I'm not going to contribute, obviously I should stay home, but I'm certainly willing to contribute. I attend plenty of meetings and I try and stay informed.
Well,
So,
we certainly appreciate and
Yeah.
note that. Thank you, Steve. Questions for Mr. Morgan?
So you've talked a little bit about, you know, what you think you can bring, but why do you want to do this? Why do you want to be a member of the Board of Health?
well, as I just mentioned, Yolanda, I'm looking for an appropriate role to contribute to the town. And as I look at the available opportunities and my background, you know, this is an available opportunity that fits my background. Obviously, the board is, for whatever reason, not appointing members to the Capital Committee. My appointment to the Capital Committee ends in August. And so I'm currently, and have been for some time now, looking for an appropriate role. I have actively participated in going to meetings about the Nyanza Committee, which is also a shared Board of Health issue. Been involved in quite a few meetings. I've involved myself with research, which I've turned over to various Board of Health members on these topics. I've involved myself in becoming familiar with some of the stormwater issues that are going on in town. And, you know, again, as I said earlier, I mean, I'm a little disappointed that this information isn't more readily available, but I have definitely dug for the information. I've been successfully getting information. Often the town has been found wrong by the state for not providing the information, so it's not my being an adversary. You know, it's my need to get the information to help the town. And I would hope people would be more cooperative with me, not the other way around. So I think it's a good fit, and I have been pursuing not just the Board of Health meetings, but these other topics that are related for a couple of years now, since they've been going on. So.
Okay. And whether you're appointed or not appointed, have you pulled papers, or will you be pulling papers for any of the seats?
So I have not pulled papers, but as I commented on my talent bank form, comment is no longer relevant, so I won't repeat it here, but I think if somebody's going to get appointed to a seat, that they should pull papers and they should follow through. And so I think I've demonstrated that I'm a person that will follow through, and if I'm appointed, I will pull papers and I'll run for the seat. I mean, that
And if
that
you're
goes
not
without
appointed,
saying.
you won't pull papers? Because there are gonna
So-
be 2 3-year seats and a 1-year seat.
So I'm undecided. I wouldn't make a commitment from this podium. I might still pull the BOS papers, you know, and I haven't decided that, but I'm likely to be looking for an appropriate role with the town to continue to participate in the town. And so I can't say for sure if I don't get this appointment and I'll pursue it. I might pursue a different appointment, but I intend to pursue an appropriate role with the town,
Okay.
one way or the other.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Other questions for Mr. Morgan? Steve?
So let's go back to the collaborative, and I certainly, well, let me backtrack. I understand you celebrated a birthday yesterday, so happy
did.
birthday. I trust you're mellowing as you age, but,
I like to think I like to think I look younger than I am. Let's put it that way.
but let's go back to the concepts of collaboration and cooperation and so on. And I get it, in the professional life, somebody's paying your dime, you're going to collaborate. But, you know, you talk in your talent bank form about participating on an inactive, you're a member of an inactive committee, which is true. It's not a disbanded committee, it's an inactive committee. And the reality is, everybody on that committee chose to quit, chose to leave that committee. And can you speak to that a little bit? Now, I
Sure.
know
Sure.
I know in the past you've talked about a conspiracy by the town manager, and, you know, if, and I get that, but talk a little bit about, you know, that collaboration and where that fell apart and
So, you know, again, like everybody, I have my own view of the situation. And, you know, if you recall, I got on that committee because I got up at town meeting and I expressed concern with the creation of a capital stabilization account. And I thought that was a questionable move by the town, was presented by the capital committee. And the chair of that committee came up to me after that and he said, well, you know, why don't you join us on the committee? And I said, sure. And so I joined the committee and with the intent of working up a nice capital plan. You know, in the committee, we talked about how Natick does a great job. They have a wonderful long-term plan for capital. And you know, we had a number of meetings. Unfortunately, what turned out, it was like pulling teeth to get any information. And what was learned was the prior town manager didn't really want to collaborate. And then there was a lot of back and forth about, you know, the membership of the committee and whether the existing town manager was even allowed by charter to be on the committee, which he was not, and I know he resigned. So, I mean, I certainly don't feel responsible for the town manager realizing he was on a committee he shouldn't have been on. He was new. He took the committeeship in place of the prior town manager. So there's a variety of ways people got on that committee. There certainly are differing points of view, as I'm sure you guys know. At one point in the committee, to try and quell all that, I started recording meetings so that I couldn't get attacked in public because people were making public statements that didn't reflect what happened in the committee room. I know I reached out to you, Mr. Mitchell, about trying to work on, you know, creating a collaborative approach to the town meeting book, which hadn't been looked at in years. And I do notice, although you didn't continue to cooperate and complete that activity, that you did do it independently with staff. So
Correct.
that was your decision not to work on it. We only had one brief meeting discussing how we're going to divide it up, and then you walked away. So, again, I've offered to be collaborative, as you know yourself. I would have liked that we would have pursued and completed that process.
of course, there's two sides to that story,
yeah,
Steve, but
yeah,
I'll hear
yeah.
yours first.
And so, you know, with anything, you need to look at the situation and, you know, work to get some goals completed. And, you know, so,
All right,
I think if you want to, you know, this isn't a judge on what happened on one
No,
particular issue.
we're not going to go back and forth here, but
you know,
it's,
if people want to understand, you know, the tax in the newspaper versus the public records up at the Secretary of State or the Attorney General's office about who was right and who was wrong, they can go look at the public record. I'm here to help the town. I have a personal opinion.
and the question
I'm here to
purely
act
was
collaboratively.
related to the
Yeah.
committee that you had been serving on and related to the fact that it's inactive. That was it. It's nothing to do with anything
and
else.
the only reason that I know of it's inactive is because this board has refused to appoint members.
In the interest of time, I just want to kind of move
Yeah.
on. The Board of Health have questions for Mr. Morgan about membership on the Board of Health? Sure.
Can he-
Can you- Yeah, or you can, yeah, wherever you want to. Go ahead.
I actually would like to ask this question after hearing everyone, to all three candidates. And I actually was surprised that we only have 3 candidates here because I understood that there was going to be a 4th one. So that today, to me, is a surprise today. I don't know when the one person withdrew. But my question of the three candidates is, public health is it has a particularly very broad scope, and actually a very deep scope. When people say it is one of the most important boards in the town, it really does serve, according to Mass General Law, a significant role. And what I see and hear by collaborating with other folks in other boards of health and Mass Association health boards and likewise, that many towns, the most productive towns, have very informed board members that know the depth and breadth of their job. So my question of all three, because I haven't heard anyone really speak to the depth and the breadth of the job. And I think when we focus on personal attacks or things like that, rather than the job, if we don't know our job, it is difficult to do the job. So my question of all three is, how do you intend to get up to speed fairly quickly? And are you willing to put those hours in, whether it's 8 hours, 16 hours, or 40 hours in the first, several months, in order to read all that legislation, observe the way other boards work, connect with the Mass Association health boards, don't wait until the fall. That's my question of all three.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So I will allow each of the three to come up and give a brief response to Ms. Margulies' question. Under 2 minutes, please.
Sure. So I'm very interested and willing to invest the time. As I'm sure the member knows, through email communications, as other members know, I've taken a great deal of time in the last few years to research issues, provide documentation to the existing members to support the positions that I've commented on publicly. So I'm certainly willing and able to do the research and provide the information. And my goal in providing it is not to be incorrect, it's just to be helpful to provide the information. So
All right,
thank
thanks,
you.
Steve. Mark, do you want to address that question? And it was Chris.
And under 2 minutes. If you need to see it, get it, and get from the team, from the boards who have that information already.
All right, thank you. Chris, do you want to say something? In response.
The short answer is yes. I am willing to take the time necessary to do the research. I've spent most of my adult life doing research. That's what we do in education. Education is all about research. When an issue is important, and it's important to me personally and to the town, that's what I do. I do research. So whatever time it takes to be up to speed on the relevant issues to the Board of Health that we are discussing and we are working with, I will take whatever time is necessary to do that.
All right, thank you. Any other
Yeah,
questions? Yes, for
I do want to add on to what Judy said. I'm sure one can do that research and work things out, and also get information from other fellow members or other citizens who are relevant to it, including Steve, who has been very helpful for getting me relevant documents when I needed it. So I'm sure one can learn it. That should not be an impedance to have them apply for it or be a candidate here. Thank you.
All right, so I think that, any other further questions for the candidates? So I think in terms of process, I'm going to entertain nominations for this appointment. Anybody have a suggestion for any? So we'll see how many nominations. So I'll ask the members if they wish to nominate any of these three candidates to be appointed.
Oh, so that's how you want to work with, or you want to
Well,
rank
there's-
them, or which way do you want to go? You want to rank them and then pull up?
Well, why don't we see who wants to nominate? I mean, unless someone
Defer
has
to
a-
the Board of Health, it's their,
Okay.
I
member
I
that
propose
they'd
Chris
be,
Daniel.
I would second that.
Okay. Any other nominations or thinking that people want to consider? Okay, so, well, we have a nomination for one position then. So we have a nomination for Chris Danielle for the position on the Board of Health. All right, so I guess, these guys need to vote separately, or we're all
No,
together?
the joint vote.
All right, so,
Majority of the.
so I'm just going to ask for all those in favor of appointing Chris Danielle to the Board of Health, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, motion carries. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Eight?
Judy voted yes.
Judy, did you vote? I heard all ayes. Did you vote, or? do you wish to abstain, or?
welcome. I'm just glad to see that you're still alive.
Okay. Good.
Did we get an answer to the question?
Okay,
So this
all
is
right.
not a Board of Health meeting, so let's, okay.
All right, so,
So we need to know your vote. Very simple.
I'm going to abstain.
okay, thank you. All right, so if I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in favor, 0 against, and 1 abstention. Although, so congratulations, Chris, you've been appointed to the Ashland Board of Health, and
I want to say thank you to all 3 candidates for coming forward. I really appreciate it. I feel like you answered our questions, so thank you for coming forward, and please consider running, even if you weren't appointed.
that's a good point. Thank you,
Yeah.
Yolanda.
Thank you.
Hold on, John.
All right, so you guys need to close your meeting, I think.
All right, all in favor of adjourning the Board of Health portion of this meeting?
Judy? You wanted to adjourn the meeting, so. Vote for it.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right,
Thank you.
So, Chris,
Congratulations, Chris.
congratulations. Just a point of order. I don't know, but you will need to get sworn in. Chris, you will need to get sworn in at the clerk's office before you could participate and take votes. Okay, just want to make sure.
All right, thank you. All right, so the next agenda item is, Mr. Town Manager, do you want to take this one on? This is the appointment of Ms. Katrina Anderson as a police officer.
Yes, thank you. And if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, I would also like to pull from the consent agenda the appointment of Kirsten Peterson and Dan Harvey to the Auxiliary Police Department as well, if you're okay with that.
Hearing no objection,
No?
we'll do that. Okay.
So, okay. So having said all of that, I would believe the chief is here hiding in the background there. I'm pleased to appoint tonight Ms. Katrina Anderson to the Ashland Police Department. Ms. Anderson is a graduate of the University of Delaware, I believe. Or else, I believe she's hiding back there, I think. I believe she was a hockey player, had a lot of other activities. She's had a number of internships in law enforcement, including the Boston Police Homicide Unit. In
Please
addition,
come forward, right? Stand
yeah.
at the podium.
in addition
Great.
to the Boston Regional Intelligence Center and also the United States Marshal Service. And so again, we go through a pretty rigorous application and selection process. Ms. Anderson is one of those that came out on top. And Chief Davis, I don't know if you want to come accompany
Chief,
Ms.
please come forward,
Anderson.
yes.
And if you would like to say a few words, and then Ms. Anderson could tell us a little bit about why she wants to be an Ashland police officer.
Sure. Thank you very much, and thank you for the time. I know the town manager just briefly mentioned Katrina's biography, and she has grown up in Ashland. She went to the Ashland school system. She went on to the University of Delaware, where she dual majored, both in interpersonal communications and in criminal justice. So it's a perfect intersection for those talents for a new police officer. She also was the captain of the girls' ice hockey team at U Delaware. And as you've heard, she's had some really in-depth and exciting internship experiences. So we're thrilled to have her. She's a hard worker. She's diligent. Her educational background demonstrates that. Her internship background demonstrates that. And she excelled at all the tests that we put her through the background investigative phase. So we're thrilled to have her, and I know she's back here.
Great.
And then on March 5th, she and Larry Rodkey, who's sitting in the back, who I know you met the last Selectmen's meeting, they're both attending the Transit Police Academy, which is actually one of the more challenging academies in the state. So, and I know she's up to the challenge, and so is Larry. So we welcome her aboard, and I'll turn it over to you.
Yep. So, yeah, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and why you pursued this career path and why you want to be an Ashland police officer?
Yeah, absolutely. So going into college, I wasn't sure what I wanted to be, but then I started to learn more about law enforcement and criminal justice, and I thought that my personality type and my interests fell right along with being a police officer. I love to help people. I'm excited to help people. I love working with people. I feel like I'm very good at conflict resolution and de-escalating situations.
Did you get any lessons from earlier?
I was just wondered who was going to make a comment.
Sorry.
So just being a police officer, I'm really excited and I'm motivated and I'm looking forward to serving the town of Ashland.
Great, thank you. So congratulations. Should we do a group picture?
Well, just one comment. First of all, congratulations, Katrina.
you.
And it must be great. I'm looking at your resume and I'm seeing salary none, salary none. So this must be awesome.
This must be.
Hey, you'd be good on the Board of Selectmen.
So congratulations.
Yeah,
Thank you so
very
much.
good.
But again, I think, and Chief, I apologize if you covered this, but you know, the process of being selected for this, you have to take a civil service exam, if I'm correct. You have to score within the top, 5 or 6, I think, to even get your name on the list, the civil service list, which is then pulled. The candidates go through an interview process, then they go through a physical abilities test, and then they also go through a background screening. So, and then they have to meet me. So, that's
That's the scary part.
That's
right?
the scary part. So if they survive all of that,
Great.
then we're good.
Well,
Congratulations.
I just want to add, I've known Katrina since she was little. She was actually in my brownie troop.
All right.
Wow.
So when I saw
You
that.
have to recuse yourself.
Well,
That's right, we have to vote, don't we?
yeah, we still have to vote. When I saw that she was being appointed, I just know that I think Ashland is going to benefit from having her here. And it just says so much to our Ashland public education and what our kids do and where they can go. So I was thrilled to see this and
Good,
Thank you
great.
so much.
looking forward
Thank
to
you.
seeing you as a police officer here in town.
Thank you.
Yeah, good luck, Katrina.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. So I guess I need a motion to waive the 15-day waiting period? Is that what this
Yep,
is
I
about?
move that we approve the appointment of Katrina Anderson as an Ashland police officer and to waive the 15-day waiting period.
Second.
All those in favor, say
Aye.
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 Opposed, motion carries 4-0.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Now we'll take a picture.
Want to do the picture, Rob?
I don't have the, come on.
Do we want to do the other two
Yeah, I think
first
Should we
and
do
then
it all
do a
at
group
once,
picture?
or one at a time? We can do every together. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Hold on,
So,
we're
Mr.
gonna-
Town Manager.
So,
We're pulling,
Um,
we're
Chief up
doing
here.
some other appointments,
Yeah.
so don't go anywhere.
Yes.
so at this time, I would like to also appoint Ms. Kirsten Peterson and Mr. Dan Harvey to the Ashland Auxiliary Police Department. Ms. Peterson has been part of the Ashland community her whole life. She's born and raised here. She's worked in the school system for, I believe, 10 years now, 10
Wow.
years. She has her master's degree in special education and works at Ashland Middle School. And I believe most of you know Kirsten's dad, who was a member of the Ashland Police Department for almost 25 years. And then, Kirsten, or Chief, do you want to say anything? And then
I'd just like to add one thing. So as you know, as the town manager just mentioned, Kirsten's dad, Randy, was on the police department for 24 years. And he started as an auxiliary officer, and his badge number was number 8. And Leo Doucette, who actually recruited Kirsten to our benefit, found the badge number 8 for her to wear. So she will be badge number 8 in the
very
auxiliary
nice.
department. And when we interviewed Kirsten, we asked her, why do you want to do this? And she said, I already volunteer for the community. This is just something that I do, so why not make it formal? So we're thrilled to have her, because that's exactly the spirit that we're looking for these assignments. So we really welcome her
Fantastic.
aboard, and we are proud to honor her family's tradition and carry on her dad's memory this way.
Very nice.
Lovely.
Thank you so much. I look forward to this opportunity and serving the community of Ashland. I'm excited. I go to the town events anyway, so might as well help out and give back. So
Forward
I'm
to seeing
excited.
you
Thank
there.
Great,
you.
yeah.
Great.
Great.
Well, thank you.
awesome.
Yep,
Excellent.
very good.
And then next, unfortunately, Mr. Harvey could not be here, but Dan has lived in Massachusetts. He moved here 2.5 years ago, actually lives in the town of Hopkinton. He has a wife and a 6-year-old son, and they actually moved here from North Carolina, where he was a state park ranger for 8 years. He's a ranger at Hopkinton State Park currently, during the summers, and he's a substitute teacher and does tutoring as well. So he was a commissioned law enforcement officer back in North Carolina, and he's also certified as an environmental educator. So, Chief,
cool.
would like to say a few.
Just an additional point that when Leo is looking for folks, and actually Detective Jim Girardi, who's here, 'cause he's the department's liaison to the auxiliaries. When they look for folks for new prospects for the auxiliary police department, they're not just looking for just anybody. They're looking for certain people with certain skills and talents that are going to benefit the complement of a great group that we already have. So, you just heard Kirsten's background, but Dan also brings a tremendous amount to the table because of his background as a park ranger in his current position at the Hopkinton State Park Ranger. So we thought that would be beneficial for Ashland, where we have so much open space and we do have the state park and the state forest.
Sure.
So we looked at his background as something that's really going to benefit us and someone that we can turn to when we have questions that,
great.
arise out
Yeah.
of that.
Very
So
nice.
unfortunately, he
Very
can't be here tonight, but we welcome him aboard also.
Great, thank you.
Great,
So,
thank you.
yes.
I just wanted to, before we vote on these two folks, I just want to comment on the work that the auxiliary police do for us, for the community, and, going to, the events that we have, and we're doing more and more events in town, and we're dependent on the auxiliary to help support that. So it's just a great group of folks, and it's expanded over the years.
Long tradition.
What's our number at this point?
Leo, 10?
Currently 9.
9?
Very good. Well, thanks to the auxiliary police for all they do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And Leo's done
Needed.
a great job with it and supported with Jimmy Girardi.
Great, thank you.
Great.
So, do we need a vote on to appoint these folks? or
I believe
is it-
so. I believe that would be
Okay,
good.
so I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we appoint we support the appointment of Kirsten Peterson and Dan Harvey to the Ashland Auxiliary Police Department. No waiving is not necessary.
Nothing, it's just an
Okay.
appointment.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries 4-0.
Great.
Good.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
All right, very good.
So I guess we're going to do a picture. I see Larry back there. Larry, did we get a picture with you last time? You did, yes. Okay.
All
Just want to make sure.
That's
Yeah, I
good.
think I was in that picture too, so.
Come on. All right, come up forward, folks.
Police officers that are here, join us, please.
Thank you so much.
You get a good one? He's not saying it.
Well, we gotta let Mom and Dad know.
Great. Very good. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Sheesh, never seen a group that likes to be photographed
I
so
know.
much
I
as-
love it. This concludes the fun part of the evening, so. All right.
I actually think that's not bad.
We're only 10 minutes late. Okay. So are we ready to continue? So, the next item on the agenda is the Trichome Health Letter of Non-Opposition for their medical marijuana facility.
So
This is a discussion we started, how long? 2 months
it
ago?
was back in 2 months?
September.
It was back in September. And actually, I believe you came and gave a presentation September 21st. We discussed it, the board discussed it on October 4th, asked me to, have discussions or put together a potential host community agreement before you determined whether or not to issue a letter of non-opposition. But we have done that. We've had discussions about that, and so I think they're here to, brief you again and talk about anything that might have changed and where you are in the process.
Great, thank you. Philip Silverman, I'm here on behalf of Trichome Health Corp. Alex Mason is here. He's the CEO of the company. We just wanted to thank you for allowing us to be here this evening, and also for working with us over the past several months, in engaging us on this matter. Again, we're here to seek a letter of non-opposition to the operation of a medical marijuana dispensary at 40 Pond Street. Since the time we last appeared, you're probably aware there's been some changes or some things going on in the state law on this particular issue. There was some legislative activity. Again, since we met, I sent over some materials shortly after that. There were, some honest questions about, what is it we're doing here? What's the medical aspect of this? And I tried to provide some materials that gave you, in particular, there was a National Academy of Sciences study that had compiled 10,000 different studies on cannabis and sort of gave you an overview of what they found it definitively, does in terms of positive benefits, what's still out there that they're not sure about. Just as an overview, as well as some information on, how doctors really are prescribing this and how it's having a very positive impact in terms of, a 25% decrease in mortality rates with respect to opiates in medical marijuana states. That was in the Journal of the American Medical Association. Additionally, there was a study I provided about in Colorado that shows that this is not resulting in an increase of teen use as well, which I think is important. So beyond that, the law, the Massachusetts legislature, added to the voters' referendum, sort of changed some of the laws around. A lot of that doesn't really impact what we're here to talk about, because a lot of that was dealing with the adult use recreational issue. And again, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about medical. Those issues are the same. It's the same. This facility is limited to medical patients, patients who go to a doctor, establish a doctor-patient relationship, get a recommendation from the doctor, take that recommendation to the Department of Public Health, get their registration card, and then get into the facility. Not the general public, who might otherwise try to access this if this was an adult use recreational facility. So that's what we're talking about here. The only impact, I think, that the more recent changes might have is that there is a requirement now that wasn't there before, that you have to have a host agreement in order to operate. Previously, in the medical realm, you had to get that letter of non-opposition, but you didn't have to have a host agreement. That's changed now. You absolutely have to have a host agreement negotiated or you cannot operate. So that brings us sort of to the other topic here, which is the host agreement. And we're pretty close on finalizing that. I think there's a couple of issues and topics that we still have a little bit ways to go, but I don't think it's anything that can't be resolved. And I hope we can sort of continue to talk to Mr. Herbert and try and resolve those. In the meantime, I think what we're seeking is the letter of non-opposition. Again, it used to be that would have been arguably dangerous for you, because you might have said, well, if we give you that letter, you can come operate, and there's no guarantee you'll ever agree to a host agreement with us. That's changed now because we absolutely have to. So you could grant the letter of non-opposition, and still we could continue those negotiations regarding the host agreement, hopefully finalize those soon, but we could not, even with the letter, operate until we have that host agreement done. So that's what we're seeking tonight is the letter of non-opposition.
I'd also like to add the letter of non-opposition. There's still many steps along the way that need to be achieved by us to come to fruition as a business. That includes the special permit process. So this is just one step along a long journey that we have to continue down. But this is the step that sort of solidifies us in making the necessary investments to continue to pursue looking into the development of the site that we're proposing.
So,
Could I,
Any questions, or?
well, I suppose we should talk procedurally, because I was, one of our members isn't here tonight, so I don't, unless the board really has, I think the sense of the board is to not take any formal action tonight, unless someone disagrees with that. So we're gonna take your request under advisement for that reason. But I was also thinking that the host agreement was really the first document that we were going to either approve or not approve, and then that would influence whether there'd be a letter of non-opposition issued. Am I wrong about that process?
No, I think this board took a different approach than other boards and other communities might have done, in that in other communities, boards would issue a letter of non-opposition, and then the applicant and the board or the board's designee would negotiate a host community agreement. What you wanted to do as a board was get, in rough terms, the terms of a host community agreement in place, and you would use that as as part of your decision-making process as to whether or not to issue a letter of non-opposition, which was somewhat unorthodox. What I would recommend is that if you're not going to take a formal action tonight, because Mr. Mignani is not here, that you take the opportunity to ask whatever questions you have of the applicant. Perhaps the applicant could talk about how this host community agreement differs from other host community agreements they've worked on. And then, if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind asking, or I would like to ask a few questions from some correspondence that we had received from a resident, or the board can certainly ask those questions as well.
I have a question for you, Michael. Why is that unorthodox?
Just because I think...
Why wouldn't one be dependent on the other? It seems logical to me that it would be.
Well, I think partially because the applicant would be putting in a lot of resources and time, as well as whoever on the town side would be investing a lot of time and resources in putting together a host community agreement. So the prevailing thought was that you go ahead and get the letter of non-opposition, and then that gives the applicant some assurance that it's not a waste of time, right, to go through this process.
We don't know what we're not opposing if we don't know the terms of the agreement, as far as I'm concerned.
They're not supposed to be related. One is to determine that, in fact, you feel that this is an appropriate thing for the town. The host community agreement really is supposed to be providing provisions that ensure that you are not negatively impacted by this. And so that's what you hold out for. You make sure you have a host community agreement that provides you with those assurances. But generally, the way we've seen it is you give us an indication, yeah, we're willing to go forward. This is something we're willing to do. And then if we can't satisfy you that the host community agreement protects you as best as it can protect you, we could understand that.
But the non-opposition letter protects you.
It allows us to go forward in the process, in the same process.
And doesn't really protect us, is that?
So, but we made
No.
that initial choice when you
Yeah,
first
and-
came
Yeah.
to pursue a host agreement
Yeah.
first. That's what we decided to do.
Sure.
The reality is, we, as a board, first of all, we don't, adjudicate these sorts of important community issues without a full board. It's just not fair for
That's fine.
for the
We
community.
understand.
So that's number one. And number two, we haven't even had a chance, an opportunity to discuss the host agreement, good, bad, or indifferent, in a public setting at this point. So, if there's things that need to be worked out, there's certainly an opportunity to do that, and then we can discuss it publicly, and then we'd be at that point to make a decision.
Sure.
I also would like to add that I don't think it was the intentions of the Department of Health that where a medical marijuana dispensary is to be located should be dictated by a host community agreement, which could be financially advantageous to a town, and for them to make a determining decision on that point alone is something I think the DPH was attempting to avoid. And by going the route of issuing a letter prior to a host community agreement, you don't get caught up in that potential situation or discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to note that unorthodox did not mean wrong. You know, I
Just
think it's
done
just
differently
Yeah,
than other
which
communities
is
have
fine.
done.
We're,
Right.
we understand, and that's fine. I think it's best, why don't we just sort of engage on the host agreement at this point, so we can try to give you some sense of where we are on that one. So I think one of the questions was sort of where this host agreement stands versus others in the Commonwealth. I can tell you, because I represent about 35 different businesses going around to different communities in the Commonwealth, that I have a fair amount of experience with this. This is probably one of the more generous to the town that I have seen, and the reason is, one of the things that just happened in the new law that was passed, Chapter 94G, is that they put some guidelines. Again, they put this requirement that you have to have a host agreement, and they put another guideline that said that you can have community impact fees that are charged in these host agreements, and they limited them at 3% of the gross revenues of one of these companies. And so what we have tended to do is, in going around and talking to the communities, is rather than get into a great debate about should it be 1%, should it be 2%, we propose 3%. It's just, nobody's quite sure how this all plays out. I can tell you, you know, my law firm is headquartered out in Denver, Colorado. We've seen a lot of how this works. I have a sense that 3% is a significant amount compared to what the actual impacts are on a community, but I think in an abundance of caution, it made sense. Let's propose 3%, you know, let's just go to the max, and that's sort of the best thing you can do. We did that. We entered into some negotiations with Mr. Herbert, who expressed that the town was looking to do some improvements on Route 126. Is there some way we could contribute to that? And so, again, I don't think that's a community impact fee. If it were, we couldn't exceed 3%. But I think we came to the conclusion, listen, we want to be a good citizen here. We'd like to contribute. And so we came to an agreement on that, where we would be contributing for a 5-year period an additional $40,000 a year. That's not without some risk to Mr. Mason, who is operating a medical business in an industry that may well be changing over with adult use recreational in other places. And there could be some financial risk to him to that, but he was willing to do it. He likes the town. He feels this is a good place to do business. He will have patients that are willing to come, and so he was willing to do it. And so that's why we were willing to add. It would be, I think, it would be characterized more as a gift to the town as opposed to a community impact fee, because you really can't go beyond 3% on that one.
And I'd also like to add something that's not noted in the host community agreement that is still a value add that the town should acknowledge, is we're taking a piece of property that currently has an abandoned structure built on it, and we will invest upwards of $1 million to develop that plot of land, putting an appropriate structure that will work with the town to fit what the town's appearance is striving to achieve. It will have ample amount of parking, and so that, in addition to the contribution, you know, is a substantial investment we're making into this town, which will result in real estate taxes and job creation. And so those things are not mentioned in the host community agreement, but they should be acknowledged as well.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, does it make sense at this time to review the major elements of the agreement, so people listening, and have you come in agreement with them in terms of the proposal, like this, the number of years has changed, and does it make sense for you to just summarize the major parts of this?
Maybe I can do that briefly, and if I miss anything that you think is significant, you can let me know. So, as they have pointed out, so we have done the maximum community impact fee of 3% of gross sales of the facility. Now, the language in the regulations right now say for a 5-year period. We believe that there is some, at least it's the town's position, that that is, for lack of a better term, flexible. And so we put in there that it needs to be for a 10-year period. I don't know if you still have disagreements with that.
I think that's sort of our sticking point.
Okay.
If you want to
Okay.
finish, maybe we can talk
Okay.
about that.
All right, so your position is 5 years, ours is 10
5
years.
years, ours is
Okay.
10.
And I would just like to add, we are okay with doing a 10-year agreement, but at year 5, it is to reevaluate what impact we had on the town and to reassess at year 5 to sort of make sure we are covering what we cost to the town. It is not that we are opposed to doing a longer agreement, but the premise of a host community agreement, and the reason the Department of Health made it a maximum of 5 years, is so that can collect enough data to see what impact economically are we truly having on the community, and then we would reassess. That is what we are proposing.
Okay, and then,
Could you give me an example of, I'm sorry, Michael,
no, it's
but while we're on the subject, could you give me an example of what these mitigation costs would include?
Yeah, I mean,
When you talk about an impact on the town, what
well,
type of
there are,
impact are you talking about?
it has been suggested that these businesses will have an impact on your law enforcement. Some towns have told us we want to go out and we want to hire another police officer because we think this is going to require some extra attention, or on your utilities, or on your other public infrastructure in some way. Some people, where you have a cultivation facility and there may be delivery trucks coming out, think that that has an impact on infrastructure. I think, one could debate whether this is all that different than a pharmacy in terms of its impact that doesn't pay community impact fees. But again, we felt that where there is some uncertainty here, we will provide the maximum, we'll provide it for 5 years, and then we'd like to sort of go through it at that point and figure out, does it still make sense?
All right. Thank you. I just have a question. We have a one-day liquor license scheduled for 8:15. Do we need to do anything with that, or?
I don't think so, no.
We can put out, okay.
No.
All right, thank you.
I think you do bring up a good point. We don't know the answer clearly, but when we compare ourselves to a pharmacy or a doctor's office, we don't believe, that's why we believe the 3% should cover our impact economically on the town. And then after 5 years, we can reassess that.
so just moving on, so generally, the guidelines say that that is the maximum from a financial perspective that the community could require or ask for. We took a creative approach to this, and as Mr. Silverman mentioned, we have included in here a gift of $40,000 for each of the next 5 years. For right now, it's listed as purposes of economic development. I think we were talking about the improvements on 126.
So are you substantially in agreement with that provision, or is there, you had some reservations about your sales with that, or? how did-
Mr. Herbert and I discussed
Okay.
this, and
That was fun, wasn't it?
yeah, it
So-
was a good meeting. But I think we came to an agreement that initially it was to be, what was requested was in sort of a one sum fee.
Right.
And given the nature of us not being exactly sure when we'll open, and we're currently still in pre-revenue, what I proposed is sort of breaking it out over the course of 5 years. The first payment would be made upon the first day of opening, so forth and so on. That is something we did agree with, but if you'd like to take it off, by all means. I'm not gonna-
I was going to suggest we increase it. Medway just came to a host agreement with a medical facility as well. I don't know if you saw that.
Which
In
one?
the paper. It's in Medway.
Right.
Different firm than yours, but I believe it was $55,000 per year is what their.
Yeah, but I think they did 1% of.
They did a lower
of-
percentage,
yeah.
yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Don't,
Well-
let's not,
No,
let's not have a.
Are they investing $1 million to develop?
Well, I guess,
property?
that brings up a good question on our end. I mean, you're a
Those are real
businessman, you're a
estate
graduate of Babson, I'm sure you've done a lot of research on this. And what do you, are you at liberty to give
Absolutely.
our projections of your your sales for
Sure.
year 1 through 5?
Yeah. First, I just want to say that if I were in your position, I would look for a partner, not just another business to be in your community. Most of these licensees are not from Massachusetts. And, you know, I have the privilege of saying I grew up in Worcester, I attended Babson College, you know, I'm moving back here. And so what I would encourage you is to find the right partner to do this with. And I do believe that I am that right fit. With that said, to answer your question on what our expectations are, currently, the current situation is there are 45,000 patients and only 19 dispensaries are serving them. On average, a dispensary does about $500,000 in sales per month, which is, you know, $6 million. At 3% is about $180,000 a year. Over the course of 5 years, it's almost $1 million.
So,
So
okay.
it is, you know, if we as
Substantial.
a dispensary have that large of an economic impact, then we need to sit down and assess what is going on.
And you still, your business model still works despite the recreational environment and despite the fact that we're, on our ballot, we have an opt-out question.
Yeah. So if you allow a recreational adult use facility into your community, yes, you will probably impact our business to the point that we will not be able to succeed. I think one of the biggest mistakes that's happening right now in the state is the fact that they're not giving a substantial enough time for the medical program to roll out accordingly. Thus, patient counts may remain low. However, given the challenges that we see from a municipal level, we're not seeing adult use opening up. I project it will take a long time before you start seeing these pop up around the state, especially in the beginning. And so I do believe that medical will continue to thrive. I think it takes years for in-state residents to realize that they even have access to such a program. I think the adult use program will incentivize those to further look into medical. So I do believe that maybe it could even help. But I think over the next few years, I do not see adult use impacting us drastically. But that could all change if right across the state, right across the town line where we're located, if Framingham decides to put an adult use in, it could become tricky. And so one of the things we would like, we've been discussing with Mr. Herbert is some sort of form to protect us from being put in the situation where we're a medical entity in your town and then an adult use entity comes in. Something to that regard. And if that does happen, you know, how do we protect ourselves? And lastly, if we decided, you know, this is something the town, I think towns will easily, slowly, gradually learn this whole, what is cannabis and what does it do on societies and what are medical benefits and things of that nature. And so I hope, if we ever run into those situations, I hope I can have a good enough relationship with all of you where I sit down and I express that, look, my business is starting to be drastically impacted by this. What are solutions we could propose? By no means am I trying to say that I want to see adult use take over and frankly could nullify medical, but those might be discussions we have in 5 years from now. But I do not believe it will happen July 1st.
But you just painted a scenario where, you know, let's assume the town opts out of recreational, so that we don't have any retail outlets.
Sure.
But Framingham does allow it, they haven't opted out. And your proposed building is probably 100 yards away from the Framingham town line.
Well, I believe with the slow on-roll of adult use, that the patient count will continue to rise over the next few years, while adult use access will be very, very limited. It's also a supply issue if you want to just think of it as a simple economics. Medical patients must be served first. And so it will take years and years to on-roll an adult use program in this state that fulfills everyone's requirements. And so I believe over the next 5 years, the patient population count will exceed 100 to 130,000 patients. In that scenario, we will be very successful in serving the medical community.
Okay, thank you.
Michael, you finished presenting the proposal?
No, I just had one more section, and it kind of ties into what we're talking about, so maybe it's timely, is that, one of the things that you made clear when we had a discussion is that you wanted to be able to retain control whether or not this facility could switch over to recreational. And so what we have in here is a provision, and I apologize if you have not agreed to this, but my version looks like it did, but says that you could only do that with the approval of the Board of Selectmen.
That is
Okay.
correct, absolutely.
So that could only happen with the approval of the Board of Selectmen. There was some concern from a legal standpoint whether or not if you licensed or if a medical marijuana facility was either going through the process or in place before the opt-out vote, and let's just say the opt-out vote was successful, whether or not that, medical marijuana facility would have been grandfathered under that. So this kind of takes care of that, so it gives the control to the Board of Selectmen.
As does the requirement of a host agreement.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, Yolanda?
So when you were here in September, you were looking at some other communities that you were working with. Is that conversation still going, or are you just now focusing on Ashland?
We have to date received approvals in Auburn and our cultivation in Lakeville. The state has granted us 3 licenses to basically have 3 locations.
Okay.
So we're looking for our 3rd location.
So currently,
Between you and I would prioritize Ashland.
so you have one cultivation
There's
currently.
no met need in this area.
So
Yes, we're
one
yes,
cultivation, you have the one in Auburn that's moving forward.
correct.
And then Ashland is your 3rd location, or would there be 2 are you looking for 3?
Ashland would be our 3rd
Okay.
location.
Okay.
Mm.
Okay.
And Lakeville is sort of a dual-use facility. It would be both for cultivation purposes
And sales.
and
Okay.
sales. And so the products would come from Lakeville. They would all come prepackaged. There would be no open containers. It would be coming in an unmarked vehicle, very small van-like, unidentified, randomly, probably 2 to 3 deliveries a week. And then, they would be stored in a safe, secure area within the store and things like that.
I was,
Yolanda?
Yeah, that was it. That was just wanted
Carl,
to see
go
what
ahead.
I
was
was
going
just
on.
gonna say, this is, the terms of this agreement are relatively new to us in the last day or so. And that being the case, and the fact that we're missing a board member, I would be hesitant to get too far into this discussion. I would suggest putting it on another agenda where we deliberate as a board, and then get back to gentlemen.
Do you want, while you have them here, do you want to ask them questions so that you have that information when you do begin your deliberation?
Are there any concerns that you may not be aware of? You may have concerns that you just would like me to explain, or I can walk you through what a dispensary experience is like. I can walk you through what the security parameters are. I can walk you through the types of patients we'll see and what it takes to become a patient. So it sort of paint that picture.
Personally, I think that you went through that stuff
Yeah.
before. I guess in a perfect world, I think it would be best for us to deliberate the contents and the concept. And then if we feel like we're moving forward, it's been so long since you gave that presentation publicly, it wouldn't be a bad idea to come in and give it so that the public would see exactly what we're voting on.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
And I do want, people, but I think it is good, if people have questions, this would be a good time to ask them, and I think we.
Yeah, no, I think you did give a pretty comprehensive
last time, very
presentation last time. I was looking for your website today, and I couldn't find.
Tricom.org.
.org, okay, so you are a night.
Tricomhealth.com.
Well, I just Googled Tricom Health Corp, and
The word trichome, and the reason we picked it, and I'll sort of explain this very quickly. When you look at a cannabis plant, you look at it under a microscope, it will have these little white hairs. And when you zoom really closely into that little white hair, it almost looks like a mushroom. And in that mushroom head are all the medical benefits to cannabis. And every strain has a different cannabinoid profile that does different things for different people and ailments. And so the trichome is really what possesses all the medical benefit. And so it is a common term used amongst cannabis research and science. And all plants have trichomes, to put it that way. So
Can you repeat your
I hope
website?
one day when you put in the word trichome that I come up first on the Google search.
It's
but
trichome.org.
Not yet.
Trichome.org. Okay.
Can I ask
Sure.
a few questions? And these are more product specific.
Before you get that, just in terms, but have we come to agreement on the basic terms, though, the 10 years versus the 5 years, how we?
Well, it sounds like that is still a sticking point.
So how does that, in our process, we address that?
Well, we'll have an update, hopefully, when we just.
Yeah,
Michael.
yeah, I think, that's something that we're still working on. I think, I feel like we're getting close to that, just, how to create a workaround, so.
Okay.
Okay.
Did you have some questions? you
Yeah,
wanted to ask?
and these are more product specific, but, and if you don't know them, I can send these questions to you, if you don't know it right off the bat. So what percentage of your sales are or will be for products containing CBD only and or very low THC products?
So we're going to start at about 20% of products being CBD. And then obviously, as we understand the patient demand of what CBD products are, we'll continue to sort of fit that in. But that's sort of, I say 20% because that's what we're seeing happening in Colorado, Washington, and Oregon, which are the very few states. Now, it's sort of unfair to compare a West Coast state to an East Coast state. And I do think CBD will continue to rise in the market share. But we'll start there. But
At 20%, but
Yeah.
you're reserving the right
yeah,
based
we're
on experience?
We're also working with the University of Kentucky on that, and the University of Kentucky is one of the only few licenses that have been issued, it's received one of the very few licenses issued by the federal government to federally legally grow cannabis under academic situations. So the University of Kentucky is the largest CBD producer in the world,
Okay.
and we are working closely with them. So
I just have a technical question. Miles, are you picking him up okay in the microphone?
Yeah, we're getting.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So
Go ahead.
the next question is, would you commit to selling products with less than 10% THC only?
like CBD products.
Just less than 10% THC. So I would assume that if it was a product that did have THC, would you commit to selling it, or if it only had less than 10%?
Yeah, of course,
THC,
of course.
okay.
There are strains that are lower in THC and strains that are higher. The one thing I think the public will need to learn as this rolls out and as we all become educated, as we all continue to research cannabis, that THC is not the only metric. In fact, you can have a low THC strain that has a very high terpene profile, and so that may cause a higher effect than a high THC strain per se. So,
Okay.
Michael, could you rephrase that question? Where's your only? Is it only products lower than 10%, or products that have 10% only?
Less than 10% THC only. So only products that contain less than 10%
So the only
THC.
is at the
Yeah.
beginning of the sentence, not the end of the sentence.
Yeah, I had to rephrase it.
If I'm understanding you to ask, will he only be selling products that have less than 10%
THC content.
He would
No.
not be selling only
Because
products.
there's very severe, people
Okay.
deal with very severe issues when
Okay.
That would
cancer
require more.
That would require a larger dose,
But
if
no,
you're-
I'm just clarifying the
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, just so
Yes,
we can.
yes.
Okay. And then, would you commit to selling only products of no more than a 5-to-1 ratio of THC to CBD? So,
I don't know if I can answer that accordingly, only because, I've met veterans that require very large quantity just to deal with their PTSD, and so I don't want to say
Okay.
yes to.
I guess,
negative
Michael, I'm not sure
effect.
I'm not sure the perspective, I guess these are Amy's questions, and some of them may be kind of technical.
they are very technical, and I just don't know.
Well,
you know.
maybe it's something we should send them in writing, they can respond in writing for us
Oh,
to
that's fine,
review?
yeah.
Because I'm not sure even sitting here if I understand how significant
Yeah.
some of these questions are.
Okay.
That
We can
sounds good.
certainly do that.
Sounds
That's
reasonable,
fine.
yeah.
And when it comes to, I don't know if the individual is asking the question to the level that they're gutting at, and I don't mean to be offensive when I say that, but there are also restrictions by the state in terms of edible dosing and things like that, that of course we'll abide to and things of that nature. You know, my goal is not to just throw a party, you know, my goal is to help patients and specifically people who deal with really chronic issues and are tired of taking opioids and prescription medication.
And I think the board gets that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think,
So I think, and just to get a sense and follow up on Carl's, so the board, you're feeling like we've got enough information now, we'll put this on the agenda in 2 weeks for more, further discussion. Is there any other questions for these folks?
No, I
from
think
the
it's just
board?
a matter of,
Okay.
I guess, either
Firming up the
agreeing
term.
or disagreeing on the host
10-year.
agreement, and then
Right.
we need to discuss it,
All right.
so.
And I am gonna allow, if anybody from the audience is here that wants to make a short statement or question while they're here, please approach the podium and identify yourself.
On a trip. Hi, Judy Margulies, 53 America Boulevard. I would like to ask the gentleman what percentage, excuse me, I just ran up the steps. Let me catch my breath. What percentage of the Massachusetts population would one anticipate in 3 to 5 years will be using cannabis for medical purposes? That question is relevant because of the business model and the projections and the stability of the business. So I'm curious as to what percentage is their business plan anticipating. And what effect will the FDA-approved drugs that are presently in the pipeline for medical use, will that affect their business model?
You guys get a sense of that?
Questions? Yeah.
I think we,
that last question just so I'm, the FDA?
The FDA presently has drugs in the pipeline for medical use derived from the cannabis plant. And to what extent will those drugs that are anticipated 2, 3, 5 years from now to be in the Walgreens and the CVS's, what effect will that have on your business model?
So I'll answer your question by taking other states that somewhat correlate to ours, to the state of Massachusetts, which is Colorado is probably the best proxy to use in this example. So currently the state of Colorado has 130,000 patients with a 5.5 million population. State of Massachusetts has a 6.7 million population, so slightly higher, and the Department of Health estimates the patient count to be reaching about 130,000 patients. Did that answer your first question? So we anticipate that by 2022 that there will be somewhere around 130,000 patients in the state of Massachusetts alone.
Could I ask a little, like, and are those patients heavy users, fine by one joint, one
That-
0.3
yeah.
ounce joint per day, or modest users where they're just smoking one joint per month?
Yeah, it's hard to answer that question because of patient HIPAA compliance issues. So I can't really tell you exactly what the patients are using and in what amount they're using. I know that the state has allowed for a 10-ounce purchase every 60 days. That's what the state feels is enough for a patient. So I don't want to steer you in the wrong direction. With regards to your question around FDA drugs in the pipeline, cannabis is currently, under federal law, is scheduled as a Schedule I drug. And so that classifies cannabis as having no medical benefit. With that said, there are many states that are stepping up, including the state of New York, who last week announced that cannabis is not a Schedule I drug because it does have medical benefits. So the FDA does not research or study any cannabis products in the United States. There are synthetic versions of the drug being created in the United States, but it's not truly derived from cannabis. However, there are companies that have gone abroad to countries such as Israel and the UK who have their health systems do allow the study of cannabis, and we're seeing drug developments happening for seizures, epilepsy, migraines. We're seeing those studied in clinical trials. And the most progressive drug that's being studied is by a company called GW Pharma, and that is a epilepsy seizure medication that's currently going into a phase 2 trial. No, in the UK. It's not allowed to be studied in the United States, only by the University of Mississippi. Is there another one that I'm unaware of?
Okay, thank you for your response. Anyone else, any other questions?
Yes, Mark Tassoni. During the presentation, you said this was going to be a medical marijuana facility?
Correct, yes.
Then you brought up pharmaceutical. My question would be, is that, well, a determination, doctor prescribe and pharmaceutical place or store, will they try to be built in one place, or will it be as licensed as a doctor / pharmaceutical medical marijuana dispensary?
All right, thanks, Mark. If you could just explain how the difference is briefly.
So
There's a difference.
I don't want you to think that I equate a dispensary to be exactly like a pharmacy. There are, in fact, many differences. You know, in a pharmacy, you can just walk in. You can't just walk into a medical dispensary. You need to have a patient ID card to present before you enter. And I think one of the things that is an issue that we need to address over time in this industry is currently physicians write letters of recommendation, and with that letter of recommendation, there's not a specific cannabis product that is assigned to that patient. It's sort of, it would be the equivalence of walking into a pharmacy and saying, that white bottle back there.
Right. Yeah.
And so this is a problem that we need to solve. But eventually, you know, there will be consultation rooms. There will, at the dispensary for patients who are less educated and not sure what they need to
It's an
obtain.
industry in development.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
This gentleman over here wants to.
Anybody else? Sir, please come on up and ask your question.
My name is Charlie Horn. I'm a commercial real estate broker, and I'm the listing agent that is dealing with this gentleman. It's the first time I met him. Everything's been over the phone because I'm just a listing agent. But I've been in the business 60 years this year, and I've developed probably 90% of the properties on Pond Street. Owned property there, developed it. Did 4 plazas in Ashland. I'm an Ashland resident. I was born on Charles Street on the kitchen table. The thing is that when Alex's company came to my group there, they came with another broker, and I got involved in it because I have 2 special needs children. With one boy, he's 52 years old now. He's had 2 seizures. My other boy has had some psychotic episodes. And I lost a daughter a little over a year ago, 2 years ago, almost 2 years rather, to cancer. And she fought it for 10 years. And going through the chemo and everything else, that after hearing some of the good things about the marijuana, I was against it when I was younger. I thought my kids, I raised 9 children, okay, and between 2 married. And I always thought my kids, I told them, if you ever take the drugs, let me know. I'll take it with you, but I've never done it. And they said, don't worry, Dad. Well, they did it anyways, you know. So, but hearing that it can, the medicinal part of it, that's why I took an interest in it. Everyone says to you, oh, you got a lot of nerve for it. Well, after researching it, it sounds like, it can really help people out. And my daughter at the last part had some real problems because the cancer went from her breast into her bones and into the brain. And if it could have eased her pain that she had, or eased her from the sickness from all these, she had 4 radiations, and she was a real trooper for it. And so after talking to Alex many times on the phone, like I say, it didn't even really look like. And to me, it sounds like it would be a good clinical thing for the town of Ashland. And seeing I'm a townie originally. And getting to the property, if you know the site at all, it was it was a farm stand, and so far it's a small lot. But if you build a building, what they're trying to do, and actually I got George Connors involved. George is probably one of the best, engineers going, and he's a botanist and an attorney and everything else. And he is in favor of how he's already been employed for another company that tried to we're trying to move CVS over, which I did that plaza. Matter of fact, I've done 4 plazas in Ashland alone, so trying to do more. To me, I think the benefit it's a very limited use piece of property. And I even, as one of the members who was on the 126 Improvement Committee, I sold my property, which that really turned out pretty good for something that I drove Steve Drilling crazy on that one, because we had 4 zones on that, but we changed it. And so I'm very concerned about Ashland. It's my hometown. And to me, I think something like this would be a benefit, tax-wise, beautification-wise. We need to do more improvements down there. And you have to sort of, work at it. You need somebody that's an expert like George Connors to get things done. So I've already sort of verbally introduced him to him, and said he's probably the best that can do it. And I've known George for years. So that's the only thing I wanted to say is that I'm backing him up, even though I'm not his agent. But I think that it's probably the best use than having another farm stand. And we want to keep things going. All right?
All right,
Thank you.
Hey, sir, could you hold on for 1 second? Sir?
What's that?
I was out when you came up. Could you just repeat your name and your address?
My name is Charlie Horn Realty. Which I was down on 126 before.
Okay, got it. Thank
so I
you
run
very
the Horn Commercial Division for Realty Executives.
Okay.
But I own property on 126 there, and Higgins Tree Farm. I own where the 126 self-storage is, and I sold just about everything on the whole strip down there. So.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else want to? Yep.
Yep.
John DeSoni, 18 Land's End Way. I spoke about this before. I'm opposed to it going right next to my residential property where I have a family with kids. I think it's going to be very detrimental to my property value. And I couldn't believe how quickly we moved from medicinal marijuana tonight to recreational. I know it's on the back door if it becomes necessary, but now I'm hearing it. I didn't even think I'd hear that for a while. I'm not sure that's the face of Ashland. They want to develop right there
John,
coming into that corridor.
But I thought this proposed agreement prohibits.
No, I think they spoke in terms of, there's escape clause where,
No.
if Framingham starts to do recreation,
No, I think how Framingham got into the conversation is that the applicant is prohibited from converting to recreational marijuana without the express approval of the
I
Board
did
of
hear that part,
Selectmen.
yeah.
Okay.
So the question was how, would some place like Framingham, a recreational place in Framingham, impact the businesses if they couldn't do recreational?
right.
So,
But there's an opening now for them to turn to recreation.
well,
Does have to be approved by the board, but there's nothing like we spoke in the beginning, that there would be something in there that they could never be recreational. So now we have now my property has a recreational possibility next door.
yeah, there's
I
an
mean-
opt-out vote, I think that's
Yeah.
on the ballot, and, but then even if the opt-out vote, let's say, failed, meaning that the town of Ashland decided they would allow recreational marijuana facilities in Ashland, the applicant would have to come before the Board of Selectmen to get permission to convert over to a recreational facility. Because you're right, that's what
It
one
could
of
be
the
done.
board, yeah, that's what the
Should that-
board
should
really
be
there's a-
allowed.
yeah.
So there's a clause now that it just can be done, period, right?
That's a clause that we haven't agreed to yet.
But it's there, it's in this moving forward
Do you want,
motion.
Well, it's
do you
in
want to
the-
read the clause? It's,
Yeah.
I mean,
It's
I,
in- It's still in the to-be-determined phase here, but you're
But
right.
is it
It's
in-
in there, it is,
is-
yes,
okay.
absolutely.
So, I mean, and I'm not sure that, it really, it concerns me, does the public, I know it's trichome, I knew what trichome was, as I looked it up and everything, the fuzz and all that, but I'm not sure when the public, Ashland sees it on the agenda, they have any idea what's going on. Will this at all be discussed with the town of Ashland before this is moved forward, or is this just gonna be like an autonomous decision?
well, John, what I was suggesting a minute ago is that we put it on a different part of the agenda another time. And at that time, I guess that the chair would probably entertain people weighing in on it. I don't believe that we're having a public forum as in like at the community center or something
Right, right.
like that. But we would like to, my suggestion was that we have a discussion about this document before we
Sure.
vote on it, not only amongst the board, but to anybody else that wants to speak to
Yeah.
this
And I
issue.
think we're likely to schedule it for 2 weeks.
Yeah, at the first meeting in
I
March.
mean, there's a lot of things, I mean, I'd love to get, I don't wanna go on here now, but I'd like to
Sure.
be part of some kind of, I mean, he was talking in terms of how things are changing and everything. Actually, what's in the news is the current administration is rolling back the hands-off approach to the marijuana.
For the
you know.
recreational.
Yeah, and all of that. It's felony. You can't do business with banks or credit cards or anything, so it'll be a cash business. Is that correct? No, there won't be cash going on there?
60% of all transactions are done with an
You need,
You need
yeah,
to-
we need you at the microphone so that the people watching.
60% of all transactions are done through an ATM swipe card, a debit card. There is a bank in Massachusetts that is banking with us. So banking is not an issue in the state of Massachusetts. And there are amendments in the federal law that protect medical marijuana. I believe you're referring to the Cole memo, which is specifically for the adult use, which wasn't really a legal binding protection anyway, but yes.
Okay, thank you.
So if they were gonna swipe there and everything, anybody who did use it would need to be a member of that particular isolated bank.
No.
It can go through federal banks that are FDIC. It can go through it?
We're getting a little off.
Okay.
Any other points you want to
No,
make,
I just,
John?
I'm against it, the parking, I mean, you get conservation of wetlands. I had my property done by an engineer, I know Charlie was talking about that, and there were a lot of hurdles just to get out of a flood insurance, so there's a lot going on back there.
Okay.
So I'll be very curious to see what happens with all of the,
Permitting.
what goes on down there with the conservation and the parking and all of that.
Well, keep in mind, John, that the whole conservation issue is not the purview of the Board of Selectmen, it's the
No, but
Conservation
it's down the line, I
Commission.
understand. This is
And the planning, I
process.
mean, this is just a first step and discussion. They'd still have to do a full permitting process through our planning board,
special
through our
permit.
conservation, special permit. So,
Right. Would there be a step along the way where the public could weigh in, or did they not
All these are
really?
public meetings, John, so conservation or planning board would all be on the agenda, as well as our meeting to, again, discuss.
So
we're
somehow I have to get the
discussing
word out about the agenda, or what it exactly means, and what the company is, and what's
Sure,
taking place.
get the word out, yep.
Okay, all right, thanks, I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. All right, so I think we're ready to move on from this one?
So we are in
Are we
agreement
still
on how we move from here?
Yeah,
Is that-
poor Bob.
So
Yes.
just so I'm clear, so,
Yes.
because I think there was some confusion after the last discussion. So what we're gonna try to do is we're gonna try to get some agreement at least on the 10-year piece, okay? Bring that back. The Board of Selectmen's gonna wanna have a discussion under old and new business at the next meeting, about the host community agreement and whether or not there's something that you want to tweak or change, I think.
well, I would recommend that we all look what we've just gotten now and get our feedback to you before you have that next conversation with them. That would be my recommendation.
Okay.
So that you at least have an understanding of what we're, if there are concerns that we're seeing, that you're not doing your, you're not getting to where you think you're done, and then all of a
then
sudden
something
you
else
get our,
comes up.
Right.
our
Sure.
comments back, so.
I agree.
I think that's,
I
yeah.
recommend we get our
That's a good
comments to
idea.
you within the next couple of days, then you can go from there, and then we can have a discussion at our next meeting.
Okay.
And Joe has this too, I'm assuming. Joe?
Yes, it was
Yeah,
sent to
he'll
the
be
board,
here.
yeah.
Okay,
Good. Okay.
all right, so that's
Thanks,
the
John.
agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So, the next is the request for one-day liquor licenses, and we have 3 separate ones, and I'm going to take them in order. Bob, which one are you here for? We'll do yours first, since
First
you,
one.
here for the
Two.
KSC?
He's for 2.
Oh, Saint Cecilia, all right, let's do, okay, so I'm going to,
But it's at St. Cecilia's, right?
well, but he's only doing one of them, yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna open the public hearing for one-day license for Saint Cecilia's St. Patrick's Day dinner on March 17th. So, the purpose of this hearing is to discuss the application for a one-day license. Anyone speaking in favor or presenting on that?
Bob, if you could come up.
Come on up, Bob. Poor guy. So I apologize, we probably should have got you in earlier, so,
Yeah.
anyway.
I'm glad I came.
Yeah, see how much you learned about.
I don't say that very often.
We don't either.
This is for a St. Patrick's Day, St. Joseph Day party at St. Cecilia's. It goes from 6 to 9. We get a beer and wine license.
It says 5 to 9 here, Bob.
5 to 9, 5 to 9. I've gone through the course. I'm licensed to oversee the activities with the disbursement of alcoholic beverages. I went to the course and passed the test last year. So we had one of these last year. It turned out to be a nice event, and even the non-Irish people had fun. So.
Very nice. All right. Any questions for Bob? Anyone speaking against or opposed to this one-day license? Do we need any further information?
How much are tickets and are they still available? How much are tickets and are they still available?
How much?
How much are the tickets?
How much are the tickets? I knew you'd ask me a
I don't know if this is
question. I don't know
directly
precisely
relevant.
the answer. I'm the bartender. I get it for free.
Okay.
So, but you don't. But you know what? There will be a lot of people who vote there. So.
Okay,
I'll,
application denied.
All right. Any other comments or questions from the board?
No.
So deliberation? I'm going to close the public hearing, having not heard any deliberation. So I think we're ready to take a vote. Do I have a motion here?
Don't we need a motion to close the hearing? Motion to close the hearing?
Motion to close the hearing. Second?
Second.
All those in favor of closing the hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None?
I move that we approve the one-day liquor license for St. Cecilia's Parish for a St. Patrick's Day dinner to be held on March 17th from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. So congratulations.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
All right. So Bob's not here for any of the others, so we'll do the, gonna announce open a public hearing, purpose to discuss the application for a one-day liquor license for the Knights of Columbus social dinner on April 28th, 6 to 10 p.m. Anyone want to speak in favor of this? Yes.
Looks like the answer is yes.
Hi, come on up.
Hi, Rob.
Hi.
My name's Andy Vale. I'm proud to be a Knight of Columbus. I'm a member of the Bishop Rice Council. I want to point out Bob Powderly is as well.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
We thought he was here for both, but I didn't see you there, so. there you
Yeah,
go.
well, sorry. You could have spoken for both.
Yeah,
you know?
there you go.
Similar to the St. Patrick's Day, the Knights of Columbus have been trying to run yearly events. We ran one last year as well. Ours is going to go from 6 to 10. The doors open after the 4:30 Mass. It's open to the public, but the majority of people who go are family members of the Knights of Columbus, parishioners of St. Cecilia's, and parishioners of St. John's. And,
Right. And you've got somebody certified to do it?
I'm certified
Okay.
for tips as well as Bob, and actually both
Great.
Bob and I are gonna be managing that aspect of it,
All
yes.
right.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Andy. Anyone speak against this application? Okay. Do we need any further information? Anybody? Comments? Deliberation? Okay, I'm going to then ask for motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
All those in favor of
Second.
closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none. Motion carries.
I move that
Okay.
we approve the one-day liquor license to the Knights of Columbus for a social dinner to be held on April 28th, 2018, from 6 to 10 p.m. at the St. Cecilia's Family Center.
Thank you very
All
much.
those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Second.
Opposed?
Second there.
Yeah,
Second.
second.
Aye.
All those in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, none. All right, motion carries. Thank you, Andy. Okay, so we got one left. I'm gonna announce a public hearing for application for a one-day liquor license for the Wine Empire, to be held on April 15th from 1 to 6 p.m. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of the, application?
Was he able to come or not?
We told him that
He didn't need to.
Okay.
Okay, he's done this before.
And, so we have all the material
Yep.
in there. Okay. So anyone to speak against or opposed to this, application? All right. Do we need any further information, or are there comments or deliberation by the board?
Well, should I take up the Mr. Mignani position on this one?
He's not, yeah, we can wait on that.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. All right, so do I have a motion to close the public hearing on the?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Public
move-
hearing is closed, and a
I
motion?
move that we approve the one-day liquor license for Wine Empire for April 15th, 2018, from 1 to 6 p.m. in their parking lot.
Second.
All those in favor, say
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Motion carries. So congratulate, Wine Empire is a one-day liquor license. All right, thank you all. Okay, so now we're on to the consent agenda. I think I'll just kind of review the minutes. I'll just go down the list, and if people, if we have any issues, or and then we can vote them on at the end, the ones that are left. The minutes of January 17th. Now, I just had a minor, that was the one with the long charter, right? If I recall, and there was one, there was one said the vote that was 3-1 said it was unanimous. So we just need to take that word out. And that's the only correction I had. Did anybody else have anything
And
else?
do we need to take that out of the consent agenda, because you have to change it as
Well,
presented?
let's do it now. then.
Yeah, I mean,
All right,
properly,
so,
that's fine.
I move that we approve the January 17th minutes with the change recommended by Rob.
all those in
Second.
second, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none. Motion, okay, so the minutes are amended.
Okay, and
And
we've
accepted.
removed D from the consent
Yep.
agenda.
D is done. All
And A
right,
is
so, approve the executive session minutes. Any
So we
issues there?
move the consent agenda as presented if we're not pulling anything
Right.
out. So I move the consent agenda as presented, items B,
Well, wait,
C,
so,
E,
okay.
and F.
All right, so let me just, if I could just, why don't I just read through them, just so people
We
will
usually
know.
post it.
Yeah, we do
Yeah.
usually
So let me
post
do
it.
that, and then we
And
can
don't
see if
ask
there's any
questions,
issues.
just present them.
Yeah. So, so approve the executive session minutes. Accept the resignation of Dan Shea from the Community Preservation Committee effective February 14th. Appoint Keith Roby to the Public Safety Building Committee. And accept the Massachusetts Jail Arrest Diversion Program Award in the amount of $45,000. And Michael is going to speak on that one later, so we don't need to take that out.
So
All
there's a
right,
motion
so-
to accept.
So there's a motion to accept the consent agenda as
And it's been
presented. It's
seconded.
been seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none? Okay. The consent agenda is passed. Okay, we're on to old and new business.
Yeah.
So, discussion of West Union Street? Does anybody want to
Yes,
start? Yeah, go
sure,
ahead.
Sure. So, as some of you may have read in the newspaper or perhaps seen it on Facebook or maybe through just general conversations with a while ago, Most of you know that there's a proposed affordable housing development at 133 West Union Street, which is commonly called the Valentine Estate. It's a project that has been in the works for several years now. It's gone through a couple of different iterations. The last application made by Capital Group Properties, which is the developer, was for 132 units in 2 4-story buildings at the property. What they had planned on doing was renovating the house, using that as a clubhouse, and then also we're going to help us transport the barn, which is a very, very historic structure here in town, off-site. That went through the Zoning Board of Appeals process. It did not go through the Planning Board because it was done as a Chapter 40B project, a comprehensive permit, under the state's affordable housing law. And so it was going to be, of those 132 units, 25% of them was going to be affordable, 75 was going to be market rate. Over the course of the hearings, ZBA hearings, the ZBA issued that comprehensive permit for 99 units. And I believe the structures were lowered to 3 stories, but again, a pretty sizable project. The developer, Capital Group Properties, decided to appeal that decision, which is their right under to the Housing Appeals Committee, and because they wanted to have 132 units, and again wanted to appeal that, and hopefully that they could get a judgment for that. During the period where it has been in the HAC, the board directed myself and Carl Hackinson at the time to have a discussion with Capital Group Properties about the possibility of purchasing the property as opposed to going through the housing appeals process and the development process. So we had several meetings, probably over the course of the fall and winter and spring, probably 10, maybe 12, with Bill DePietri, who is the owner of Capital Group Properties. And so we were able to come up with an agreeable purchase price for both properties of $3.5 million. So looking at that, we thought that in and of itself was pretty significant, the fact that we were actually in the ball game, so to speak, after the permit had already been issued. But we felt like there was some more that we could do, and one of the reasons why we thought it was important to purchase the property, or at least give people the opportunity to purchase the property, is because the abutting landowner, which is the Hicks family, owns 16 acres. And it was almost assured that if the 133 West Union Street project went forward, there really was very little incentive for them to keep the property the way it is. So we also approached them about putting a development restriction on their property, which they agreed to do. Currently, under the zoning, they could do 22 single-family homes, but I think more importantly, without this development restriction, they would be able to do a 40B project there as well. So you could see something similarly as massive on the property above the Valentine Estate as well. So they agreed to limit their property development to 8 additional single-family homes. So at that point, the board, needed to make a decision as to how to finance this. We thought it was appropriate to utilize a little bit of CPA funding, roughly 20% of the purchase price for CPA funding, and that was actually part of the agreement with the with Capital Group Properties as well. So currently, what we're looking at is a $3.5 million purchase price, $700,000 of which would be financed through Community Preservation Act funds, the rest being $2.8 million, which would be through a debt exclusion that would be on the May 15th town meeting. I did a little bit of financial calculations related to this and the purchase price. And so if you looked at the $2.8 million, what it would add to the average single-family tax bill, it equals $33. But if you look at the financial impact of the project on the town, meaning if you look at what we get in tax revenue versus what it would cost us in terms of expenses, it would actually cost taxpayers $66 to pay for the services associated with this property.
A year.
A year. So, you know, even if just looking at the 133 West Union Street property, it was, we felt like it's a good value. But I think, again, the fact that the Hicks property and the Hicks family has been willing to severely limit development on their property versus what they could have done, and you look at the potential financial impacts of that, makes this a pretty significant opportunity for the town to determine its future. So I know that was a pretty long explanation.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit, if I could.
Yeah, sure. Carl's spent a lot of time on this.
A lot of there will be at least 3 warrant articles that deal with this, and maybe 4. And they're all interrelated, and they're all contingent on the others passing. So the Hicks agreement only is effective if we purchase the Valentine estate. And if we don't purchase the Valentine estate, then we don't protect the subsequent 16 acres behind, and we expose that to a 40B development. If we do purchase the Valentine estate and the Hicks agreement is also approved, then that trumps any future attempt at a 40B, because that restrictive covenant would prevent a 40B application from going forward. And I think that's important to note.
So,
Mr.
yeah,
Chair.
just, yeah.
And just to piggyback on Carl's description of process, there's the potentially four warrant articles that need to be approved. But then subsequent to that, there's also a ballot question, which would entail the debt exclusion. So it's a multi-tiered process here that needs to be accomplished ultimately at the ballot box.
And hopefully we can, we have the time now to explain this thoroughly over the next couple of months. And again, they are all contingent on all of them passing. If one fails, the whole project fails.
Right. Much like, yeah, it's all.
Yolanda, do you have any comments?
No, I think Michael explained it very well. I just remind people to, ask questions, and if you're not sure, if you're not, understanding it, be sure to come out as we talk about this more and get the information out to the people. But to Steve's point and to Carl's, it's not just okay, we've decided to do this. It is going to take the vote of the townspeople at town meeting and at the ballot box if this is really what the community wants.
And one of the other questions that's come up a lot are, what will the town do with the property? And that's, that has yet to be determined. There are a whole lot of good ideas that are being discussed, but we have to purchase the property first, and then that will be a public discussion. It won't be a Board of Selectmen only discussion going forward.
And the only thing I would have to add in terms of process, so we look at a very challenging schedule ahead in town meeting and town elections to get all these kind of major things, out to people, and it speaks to that whole kind of, public information and forums and how to schedule that stuff. And
I was going to speak to that when we got to
the
warrant
article.
articles, but Kate's point is very well taken. I mean, these are some significant items on the warrant and on the ballot.
Sure.
And we can talk about it more when we get to that.
And the other thing is to go to the point of your analysis, is that something that we could get out to the people, like on the website, the fiscal impact analysis? Because I think that's an important part of this whole
absolutely
part of that, and so people can look at the kind of analysis that was done. And
absolutely.
Okay. Anything further on this?
Well, I do just want to reiterate what Carl has said. I mean, there's going to be some question as to what can we do with the property, but since this has kind of become public. And Allison, you did a great job on the article, by the way. I don't say that a lot, so, but not to you. I mean, to other people, I haven't said that a lot. Let me clarify that.
There you go.
Can I help you with that foot there?
Quite a compliment.
Yeah, that's a compliment. But a lot of, I've heard great support for doing something like a community like an arts or something, you know, center. I personally have my own reservations about that, but it's a town-wide decision. But another thing is the community farm, or it's the place where you could have a dog park, or you could do a number of different things. But the key, just like with the Oregon Road parcel and with the Girl Scout property, is that you have to own it to be able to give yourself, as a town, the opportunity to make that decision. Otherwise, people are going to make that decision for you. So.
Very good.
Okay, good.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, before we get into, you want to just, no, we're going to do review warrant articles for town meeting now.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Actually, Jen's been assimilating the warrant, so any complaints with delays and getting it out and everything should be directed to her, not to me.
That's fine.
But she's gonna run through the articles.
So we've talked about a couple, excuse me, already. So we have the annual budget, approvals. Obviously, we do that every May town meeting, and with that will be the capital authorization. And then we have the typical annual consent authorization for the town, and then also for CPC. We just spoke about the potential warrant articles for 133 West Union, which would include acquiring the land, but then also the restrictions on the Hicks property.
And
So
that's not on this list yet, is it, or is it?
It is,
somewhere?
yeah.
133 West Union
Mhm.
land acquisition is there.
Well, I
Yeah,
see
so-
that, but I don't see
and
the
Hi-
others.
It's the very last one.
Oh, okay.
Well, there are two there.
Declaration of covenant with
Mhm.
Hicks, okay.
So this is sort of a running list, I should sort of preface, this is
Sure.
a running list of items that could potentially make the warrant. So the notice of intent period is still open through March 7th. I've been keeping basically just a list of the title. We haven't started to really assimilate the actual warrant with the language, because we're still receiving
Sure.
notices of intent. Some of these may be pushed off to fall because they may be not ready, but I want to have a running list of things that could potentially be on the warrant.
And just to if somebody wants to suggest it, what's the deadline, is March 7th? Yeah, okay.
March 7th.
And as we look at this is just, as you said, something to track, because charter recommendations is gonna be more than one warrant article.
Yeah,
gonna
so
be
I made a
multiple
note there, I had
ones.
to outline
Okay.
them, so it's likely going to be somewhere between 9 and 13, so
Yeah.
how we have to,
Yeah.
put those together. And typically I receive, notice of intent from CPC, but they have not had their hearing yet, so
Okay.
I'm assuming that this list will continue to change, over time. One of the things that might change is the zoning, so right now I have a placeholder, for several zoning articles. The planning board is working and discussing several, options. Not all of them will likely make it to Springtown meeting because they have to hold hearings, they have to do a lot of work, leading up to any zoning change. But Sheila has been working with the planning board and sort of outlining potentials. And so this really captures all of the potentials. So I would assume that some of it is not going to make it. But we
Okay.
did discuss having marijuana opt-out. That may result in two, a general bylaw and a zoning bylaw. We're still working on town council with town council to get some clarification on that. There's basically some zoning articles that would clean up language, removing the commerce district in several sections where the district no longer is viable, and then also changing the map so that it actually corresponds correctly. Planning board is discussing potentially altering the special permit section to better align with Mass General Law. Changing dimensional requirements for multiple use, which is section 416. And then also a groundwater overlay, which would be for the MWRA connection, working with DPW on that as well. And then several potential road acceptances, one being, which is not on your list, and I apologize for that, but potentially accepting the MBT access road, Hillcrest subdivision, which has several roads, and that one may be pushed off, and then Royal Colony. I think that's it for zoning. Oh, and potentially, I'm sorry, so acquiring land for public safety, and depending on that parcel, there may be a need to have a zoning change.
For the parcel that we're looking at.
And how realistic is the 40R district? Is it?
I personally, I think it's not very.
Yeah, I think they're discussing sort of feasibility and looking into it. Again, this is the running list of what's on their agenda, and so just in case it does make it on.
There's like 4 different entities talking about 40R districts.
Right.
Yeah.
Somebody brought it up, some genius. So.
The school feasibility study will also be on for spring, as well as a business incentive program. There's been discussion about proposing enterprise fund for stormwater, as you well know. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to say I've spoken with the Stormwater Advisory Committee, and obviously, you know, it is within the board's purview whether or not to put it on the ballot, or not, I mean, on the town meeting warrant, but my recommendation is to not do that and wait until the fall. So.
Your recommendation to them or to us?
To you. And I told them that that was going to be my recommendation to you.
All right.
What's the concern, though, in regards to when this kicks in September?
Well,
You know, are we at risk
that is a good point. I think with the budget that we are putting forward, we have one-time funds in the general fund budget in DPW to do a stormwater management plan. We feel like that is a good faith effort to move this forward, and feel like that demonstrates the fact that we're taking this seriously.
Okay.
And I think the challenge and the good thing is to get it in, at least initially, into our regular budget and handling it there as much as we can.
As much as we can, and I think, you know, we had a very good, robust debate about this at FinCom for 2 hours, and you know, there's several reasons that you don't want to put it in, you wouldn't want to put it in the general fund, but it also comes to the fact that even if you wanted to put it in the general fund, you wouldn't be able to do that. You would have to, I mean, that would fall under DPW, and you would end up having to cut a lot of other things within DPW. So somebody even proposed an override for doing stormwater as a possibility. I didn't see that going very far.
The Nyanza Advisory Committee has also asked to put a groundwater use restriction bylaw on the warrant as well.
Yeah, and just an update, Jen and I didn't get a chance to touch base on this beforehand, but that is probably going to be pulled as well, based on council's review of the bylaw. There's just a lot of concerns.
Time needed. It sounds like, this is the one to remind me, this is the restrictions around the plume area.
The plume, correct.
Which is something we all kind of talked about at the time. It seemed like a good follow-up.
Yeah, it's important. They've done great work, and they have put in place, you know, a way to, you know, enhance public safety here in town and public health. It's just not necessarily legal, so.
There's that minor detail.
Well, but Attorney Mead understands the intent of what's trying to happen, so she's going to work with them on how to craft it to where it works.
Good.
Mr. Chair?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So just a question regarding and to clarify which of these, if they make it into the warrant, which will also require going to the ballot as well, because it seems like there could be a very active ballot or election this coming May. So
yeah, so we quickly brushed over the public safety land acquisition.
Yeah.
We continue to speak with the landowner, and we're hoping that we can make some progress over the next few weeks so that we can have a more robust conversation with the community on that. But if we were to acquire land, then we would be asking for acquisition and then also engineering, and so that would require a ballot vote as well.
Yeah.
133 West Union would require a ballot vote.
The school feasibility
The
study?
school feasibility,
Yeah,
and then also the marijuana opt-out.
and the opt-out. Would the opt-out be one question?
So we're still working that out
okay.
with town council.
So it's a doozy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a doozy.
Interesting
Something to
election.
think about, the
Um,
logistics of it all.
Yeah, town meetings. So just to remind you, so after talking with the moderator, first night of town meeting will be May 2nd, okay? The second night of town meeting will be May 8th, and that meeting will be dedicated solely to the charter questions. If there are any remaining articles from night 1 or night 2, which was the charter night, they would be taken up during night 3, which is going to be May 10th.
Oh, so we're going to the Tuesday, not the Monday? Don't
Yes,
we typically go to the Monday after?
By charter, we usually go to the Monday,
Okay.
but the moderator could not do that, so
Excuse me.
we did move
Okay.
to the Tuesday.
So May 2nd, May 8th, and May 10th are the potential
meetings.
3 nights of town meeting.
Yep. And just looking at this, we're probably gonna need them all.
So put those on your calendar, everybody.
Yeah, so I have outlined the charter, all the recommendations that were put forth, and there will be there'll be 9 to 14, depending on how they
Yep.
can be structured into the articles, so that will probably be a full.
So going to some of the conversation we had earlier regarding, how we disseminate the information out to the public and how we offer public forums and interactions and so on, how do we best do that?
It's a really good question. It's something that we've talked about, and, the board and management has had a discussion about, what do we do? Do we prioritize things and not do as much, and that way we could focus more attention on each individual article that was left, or do we try to push forward as much as possible? And we've chosen the latter. I think the school department, I think they've got a good handle on the feasibility study. I think they've been able to get out in front of it. I think they will continue to do that leading up to town meeting. The public safety building, so part of the problem is that we're still, having this conversation with the landowner of, trying to work out something with him. So we know relatively what the costs are gonna be, at least for the engineering. We've started working with the chiefs of the fire and police department to start talking about a public awareness campaign, starting to put together visuals, actually starting to get, pull out information from the archives back when this was initially discussed in 2008. And then I think with the Valentine estate, I think, having a couple of, public meetings and talking about, this is what we're trying to do and this is why it's important. And, I think we need to do that. But to some people's point, I think we need to have more, the town manager forums are inadequate for a lot of these
Well,
questions.
it would seem, if we're calling March 1st through May 1st the public hearing process, then, it would make sense that we would need to make ourselves available for some additional meetings or time
Yeah, sounds like it.
to open up to
We
the
haven't even
community.
discussed the marijuana forms.
No, we really haven't. But when I look at this, I'll tell you, for me, probably the most confusing parts of the warrant would be the planning board items. And, depending on what they actually decide to put on there, the zoning changes, I think for most people it can be very confusing and, that's not for us to
No.
communicate or explain, but
That's a challenge, because zoning is always a challenge,
Right.
and it's something that's difficult, that needs to be made simple and understandable.
Right.
And it needs to be made understandable and passed by 2/3. So unless there's, when we had the zoning change at 466 Chestnut Street, there was kind of a designated champion for that zoning change that kind of brought everyone together. And so sometimes these zoning things, if you can focus on 1 or 2 instead of 5 or 6, you can kind of, as you say, Michael, laser focus on them and take a difficult issue and and make it simpler.
Yeah. So,
'Cause-
but I think your point of having champions for different, you know, different parts of these, different articles would be important.
Probably a good thing to, you know, when we do our public hearings or forums.
So I think you might even want to have a discussion, you know, we usually go closer to town meeting, go through speaking roles. I mean, you might want to have a discussion as a board and take
Sooner
on
rather
some
than
of
later.
these, yeah.
Right.
So we'll be looking at this every meeting until, and then
Until
maybe,
the warrant closes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so we need to do some serious thinking about scheduling.
Yeah, I think when Joe gets back, we should pick some dates out and.
Yeah, so next meeting
Yeah.
agenda.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Jen, anything else on that?
I think that covers it.
And also, and is this, to go back to previous questions about posting this information, the draft warrant, is that something we get out to people just so they can
So,
have an idea of what we're wrestling
I don't know
with
that I would
here?
put this out there yet.
no, I think, so let me go back, because
Sure.
I have to say this. You know, when we got here, the warrant was pretty much given to people at town meeting. Like, that was when people first saw the warrant, maybe a week in advance. So we, you know, Tony and I both made a commitment to at least have the warrant out 2 weeks ahead of time. You know, it might not have the FinCom recs, but at least you would
Sure.
have the articles. I think last year we got it out 4 weeks ahead of time without the FinCom recs. So again, you're only as good as your last, you know, iteration, right, or your last bit. So I
My
think we'll just
question is,
continue to.
So we're looking at these 2 pages, we've got a list that we've just gone over verbally. I mean, why not just post it, you know, and just constantly change it,
I think
unless there's a
that's-
lot of issues
Because
with
I
doing
think
it.
it gets confusing. If we put this out now and not all these things then go on it, I think it's gonna cause confusion for people.
I think so.
I think
because
until
I think,
it's more refined as to what, you know, we don't need them focusing on things that they're not then gonna have to be voting on at town meeting, because they could confuse them with things that they actually do wind up voting
Well, I
on.
guess my only, because we are discussing them.
Right.
yeah, but they
talking
take
about.
on a life of their own, as
Right.
Yolanda said.
Right.
You know, it's
Well, I
like
know what the
uses of
sense
the
of-
Valentine estate. I've already heard about 10 different uses of the Valentine estate that I had never even heard of until I heard them through the grapevine, you know, and we haven't really had that discussion as a public.
Alright.
We've had it
So-
informally, if it could be this or it could be that, but sometimes you give people just enough information to hang
But in
themselves.
fact, this document is part of the meeting
Right.
materials, so
Right.
will be available for
Right,
somebody,
just not-
certainly
Right,
to
but-
look
Just
at.
not till we
But it's
do the
not an
minutes.
official warrant tracker
Right.
necessarily.
All right, so I'm getting a sense of we're comfortable with this. I would just suggest, though, as we go along and these start to solidify, I think it
I
makes
agree,
sense to
Mark.
put it out
Mark,
as, this is a draft, this is what we're dealing with, you know.
Yeah, we usually put together what's known as the warrant tracker, where we have the articles and we have the hearing. Like, so some of these have statutory hearing dates associated with them, like the planning, you know, planning board meetings. And then if FinCom needs to provide recommendations on them, so, you know, we try to put the FinCom dates.
Yeah, this is more of a running list. so
Yeah,
I
this
think
is
we're-
so
get it,
early,
but-
I mean, so much earlier than what, you know, we usually do in
Right.
terms of
I-
talking
I
about
think,
it.
as I said, I think some of the difficulty comes when we're talking about it. We've got a packet in front of us, but people sitting watching us don't and can't get it, and, you know, then they start asking questions, so anyway.
I mean, one of the things that we've explored is the possibility of putting, well, this is a separate conversation, but putting, you know, packets online, like in advance.
Yeah.
We have some concerns in terms of
Okay.
sensitive information that the board is privy to that, you know, the general public is not, but it's something that we're talking
Okay.
about.
And if this would, you know, I would even now put a big word called draft over this,
Well, that's what
so
you
that if
do,
someone
sure.
sees it, you know, because it doesn't say that here, it says article title and who's the sponsor. So if someone looked at this, they'd go, this is potentially what we're looking at.
Yeah, that's a
There
good
should
point.
be a big draft over
Right.
this.
And also a date, you know, a
Right,
revision date.
and a revision date,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. All right, I think enough on that. Next, Mr. Town Manager,
Thank you.
the budget update.
Actually, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, you'd asked for a update on the
Oh, yes,
grant.
sure.
So, and what you had accepted during the consent agenda is we've been awarded, again, the Ashland Police Department has been awarded a grant through DMH to continue our jail diversion program. This, what this does is it allows us to employ a social worker, for lack of a better terms, who can be available to the police department. So when they encounter a situation where jail might not necessarily be the best option and the best solution to the problem that's being presented to them, they have the opportunity to, basically interact with a social worker instead. So that's through a grant. So
I love the title.
Jail diversion program.
Yeah.
I wish they had it
The
back when I
jail
was-
/ arrest diversion
Oh.
program. I'm all in.
That's a good thing.
But we were already doing something like this, weren't we? Is that?
Yeah, and through a grant. So,
Yeah, so this is a
and we have
nice
to continue.
Very good.
Keep
This has been
applying
a
and
few
keep
years.
getting it. Yeah,
that
it's been going on for a while. It's a good
Yeah, I
thing.
remember, I think last year Chief Davis spoke to this,
Yeah.
Yeah.
pretty
remember that.
strongly, so.
Excellent.
All right, FY 2019 budget update. So I believe it was provided in your packets. You might not have picked up your latest version, but we don't really have any changes in the budget since we talked last time. I will say that the capital program is moving along nicely thanks to Jen and Brittany. They've been working really hard with Joe Richardson, our facilities director, Barbara Durand of the school department, and Doug Small. They should be ready for us to present the capital plan at our March 21st meeting. I will say that based on the charter, the Board of Selectmen will be voting on the budget at the next Board of Selectmen's meeting, your March 7th meeting. So,
Okay.
again, I don't foresee any real changes coming up. The school department did have there was a small discrepancy between what they were asking for and what was provided under the financial policies. Superintendent Adams and I talked about that. He was able to present a budget that was in line with what was, what we would be able to do. So we're very fortunate with that. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Jim brings up a good point. So the school committee will be looking at the capital budget next week just because they like to look at their projects first and make sure that, they're all good before it gets assimilated into the full plan, and then we talk about it with the board, and FinCom. Next.
So when are we gonna see the capital budget then? Is
March
that
21st.
March 21st.
So, well, that's when we'll have a presentation. We'll probably have it earlier than that, right?
You should, yeah.
So, okay, next is actually the Positive Passion and Will event, which is the John Troutwine event. It's actually listed on the agenda twice. So, John Troutwine is a former Red Sox relief pitcher. He's the co-founder of the Will to Live Foundation. And that was founded after the death of his son, Will, by suicide in 2010. So a number of departments and a number of organizations have pooled resources together, including with the town of Hopkinton. We were working with them to have John Troutwine come and spend the day with us on March 26, 2018. Throughout the day, he'll be giving a number of presentations to different people at the schools. We'll be having a community conversation. He'll be having one with our first responders specifically. We'll be able to shape up that schedule more as we get closer to the date. But again, that's March 26, 2018. Folks will be invited, especially the community conversation at the high school auditorium from 7 to 9, and we hope everybody can attend. This is, something that, really hits communities hard and hits close to home. So I think it's going to be an important event that we have. So hope everybody can make it.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, if I may, I had an opportunity to listen to the listening session that was hosted by the White House this afternoon, and it was a very, very strong and powerful display from students and parents from Parkland, Florida. There were parents from Newtown, Connecticut. There were parents from Columbine. And it was just a very, very powerful display of articulation about the concerns that, or the issues that our high school students are facing. And you know, the mass shootings aside, one of the biggest issues that, or the predominant issue, is teen suicide. And you know, it's just a huge, you know, I personally didn't realize how the magnitude of it. But listening to a lot of these parents that have lost children and then have gotten into providing programs and services, as they start to explore the whole mental health component, it is just a huge problem. So I certainly, you know, this is on my calendar. I think it's important for our entire community to be participating in this. And but if you get a chance to replay the listening session, and I commend the White House for doing this, it was a very, very powerful.
Okay, thank you.
And I have to put a plug in, because this is the type of stuff that we kind of envisioned doing when we put together this human services and community programs. You know, working on all aspects of mental health issues and social work issues here in the community. And I'm just so glad that we're able to do a lot of this stuff now that we weren't able to do a year ago.
And so you said he has a number of meetings, but really the big one for the general public would be the one at 7 to 9
7 to
p.m.
9, correct.
On March 26th at the high school auditorium.
Correct.
Okay.
So next is just give you an update on the Sears Plaza. So Habitat for Humanity has a what's known as a restore, and they have a number of these stores all over New England, but they have decided, fortunately, to open a supercenter, a restore supercenter here in Ashland. It's going to be one of their biggest stores, if not their biggest store. And their restore is an opportunity for people to go and get goods, you know, whether it's furniture or whether it's home improvement materials, you know, things like doors, windows, paint, at deeply discounted prices. And whether they are, you know, gently used items, or if they are, you know, new items that are overstock items from, you know, a contractor or a contract job, you'll be able to have the ability to find those at the restore. I met with the woman who is going to be running the store, and so we talked about a few things and some of our concerns. I think it's important to note, somebody brought up the issue of nighttime deliveries and noise. So they're going to have no nighttime deliveries. Their hours are going to be limited from 10 to 5. I believe they're starting out 3 days a week, maybe 4 days a week. No material will be outside, so they have a very, very, very large showroom floor. They're going into the Sears Plaza. So they'll be using most of that space. So none of the material will be outside. Deliveries that are going to be made won't even be done outside. They'll actually be going through one of the garage bays at the muffler.
End of the building.
Yeah, muffler end of the building. So by all accounts, it seems like a real win for the community. So it's been vacant now for, I guess, you know, close to a year. Parsons bought the property, you know, a couple months ago, actively, you know, looked at finding a tenant. They did find a tenant.
Any word on the Blockbuster building itself? Is that the old Blockbuster building that's in the front? Did they purchase that, and are they looking to do anything with that?
I believe they purchased that. I know that they're looking to do something with it. I don't think there's any news with it yet.
So would this involve renovations of the existing building? Or?
Yeah, they're making some renovations. For the most part, it was, you know, it was in pretty good shape. I think that was one of the things that, you know, attracted them to the site.
And they will be paying commercial property taxes there.
Correct.
Because they're a private.
Even though Habitat for Humanity is a nonprofit, the property owner, you know, is a for-profit institution.
Any idea how it compared to the old?
No, it's a good question. You know, some analysis that needs to be done related to that. So,
question. You spoke to deliveries.
I think what was brought up before was not deliveries so much
Dumpsters.
as dumpsters. And so maybe we could get out in front of that, at least with that building, because I know that that building was an issue when it was occupied for the people that were up on the hill there. And while we're talking about that, I guess it might not be a bad idea to try to reach out to the people that have the contract for the plaza there where, what's there now?
Domino's, yeah.
No, the
Monroe.
grocery store there.
Oh, Shaw's
Shaw's.
across the street?
No. Down where they were talking,
Oh,
Market
Market
Basket,
Basket.
that whole area, that's where the problem was, with
And
the
still is.
dumpster collection there. And so maybe we can reach out to those companies
Yeah.
and kind of avoid this, the interaction with the I mean, if we can have a conversation and address that issue proactively and not have to involve the police, that's probably the best situation. So it won't be reoccurring.
So,
But that's good news about the plaza.
just on an economic development front, we'll have more of a discussion and an announcement about this, but I will let you know that a lot of, ever since I got here, people have been clamoring and talking about the need for having a coffee shop downtown. And I'm pleased to say that the Bagel Table, which is actually owned by one of our farmers market regulars, OMG Bagels, will actually be moving into the 21 Main Street storefront probably in March. So you'll actually have an opportunity, the town will have an opportunity to go enjoy, freshly baked goods and coffee downtown. Finally, so it's pretty interesting. I did not understand this, but Ed, who is the owner, actually has a connection to Mahitables. I think he used to supply food for.
He lived in
for them.
Ashland
So,
Wow.
yeah.
at one time.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then finally, Cadillac Paint, we discussed today, or not today, earlier this week, with a demolition contractor, a timeline and what needs to be done, and had a very good conversation with him. Looks like we'll be starting that in March.
Yeah, mid-March.
So,
Once it starts, it will take about 3 to 4 weeks to take and remove all the buildings.
Oh, is it not a just take it all down kind of thing, or?
Well, they have to remove all of the materials. That will be a decent amount of materials to
Okay.
remove off the site.
so,
And
and,
there's 6 buildings, so.
Okay.
and then you're working on, do you want to give an update on the
Sure.
soil remediation?
Sure. So today, actually, we opened a bid opportunity for the final soil remediation. That will close on, I believe, March 21st, and so that we'll be able to sort of sequence the 2 projects.
Good.
So hopefully, we'll be under contract right as the demo is complete, and we can move right to soil remediation. I would assume that would take a little bit of time, and then, because they will, excuse me, they will remove anything that's contaminated and then backfill.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we should start looking at summer discussions as to what people want there and what we think might be good.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna be limited in what we can do just by the taking, it's,
Mhm.
parks and playground
Yep.
purposes. But, yeah, just to summarize, we own the property now.
Right.
We've enacted the taking. DEP waived the lien after negotiating with them. We've got the bids in. We've got a contractor to do the demo. We're putting the bids out for the soil remediation. So,
Very good.
and we're finally gonna get it done.
You can find something for Eddie Hart to do.
I know,
Rest of
what's
his
Ed
life.
gonna do? He's gonna be on FinCom,
Hmm.
so, since he's on FinCom now.
All right, thank you, Michael. All right, so I think we're ready for board reports. We'll start with Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a couple things. The Board of Selectmen's Upper Charles River Subcommittee, Trails Subcommittee is meeting tomorrow. It would be actually our first meeting with the Upper Charles River Trail
Upper
Subcommittee.
Charles Trail.
So we'll be meeting tomorrow morning, 8:30, downstairs in room BC. I assume you got sworn in for the subcommittee?
Yes, I'm all set.
Okay, so the Board of Selectmen are
Get sworn in.
good. And so we'll be meeting tomorrow. And then second is just on behalf of the farmers market, a thank you to the community for the support at our indoor market. And it's become a successful expectation, I guess. We're including or adding an additional market. We're not sure what we're calling it, a pre-spring or a mid-spring market on April the 7th. So more information to be determined. So again, we thank the Ashland community for your support.
Okay, thank you. Yolanda?
So just to follow up on Steve's comment about the Upper Charles, the Trail Committee and the subcommittee tomorrow morning, he did request input if anyone had any thoughts on what they had questions about. So hopefully people have gotten that to him.
Yeah. Did you get a good response?
I did. I have some, and I think they're questions that we've all talked about. I think that there's some overlap, but I would say I probably have about a list right now of about 12 separate
You've resolved
concerns.
mine, no doubt.
I eliminated yours, though.
Okay, very good.
I wanted to congratulate the farmers market. It was a great event. It was fun to stop by. It was amazing how many people were there, that it was just a steady flow I heard all day, so that was good. And I just want to announce that I am up for, my seat is up this spring, and I have pulled papers, and I've been certified, so I will be on the ballot for Board of Selectmen for re-election this spring. And that's it.
Thank you, Yolanda.
I would just like to speak to something that we talked about earlier, the 133 West Union Street issue, and thank the board and the town management. It's been an awful lot of work over the last 6 months. It's a lot of moving parts in that whole thing. It's going to take a lot of coordination going forward, but it took an awful lot of coordination to this point. Sometimes it was easier than others, and sometimes it was more difficult than others, but we all kind of pulled together. We all listened to each other, I think, and I think the best part about it is it gives the town the opportunity to vote on something that's very important to the town, and that it gives the town the opportunity to vote on something that directs a large part of the future of the town. So I wanted to thank you all for working together on that. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Carl. Just briefly, the town clerk asked me to remind people to put their census forms in. Apparently, there's still a lot of people that have not completed it. I have to confess, I may be one of them, but
Cheryl's got a way to make
Oh,
you
no.
feel guilty.
yeah. And also, but there is an issue that people are improperly filling out the forms. They're using M and D, which M is moved and D is deceased, which are very important things. So you put that on the form, and you're gonna be taken off the voting rolls. And people apparently are using M when they get married and things like that, and signing it and getting themselves. So that's just a caution that she asked me to pass along.
What do they use D for?
Divorced.
Divorce.
Yeah. Oh, sounds good. So anyway, yeah, sometimes it's too much information,
Thought it
so.
was-
Yeah. And the other thing, just to follow up on, the events in Parkland and some of the, some of the responsibilities or thoughts that we have as public officials when a tragedy like this happens. I did, here in Massachusetts, I think we've got some very strong gun control laws, and I think, we're all hoping that in a national scene that, I have to say it's the Republicans and the Trump administration will come around to at least starting to take some sensible action. I was especially inspired by the students, children really, in this high school, and their reaction to the events and the way that they've started almost like hopefully a whole new movement to actually make some change. I think it's, fitting that Marjorie Stoneman Douglas is the name of their high school, and Marjorie Stoneman Douglas was a conservationist and a writer, and she wrote Everglades River of Grass in 1947, back when the Everglades was thought of as a large swamp to be filled. And she was one of the people that changed the perspective of the Everglades into what we see it today as a national treasure, one of the most popular national parks in the country. And so I'm just hoping that these kids can start a similar kind of change in attitude towards gun control in this country. And I think it's fitting that their school is named for her. And just closer to home, I did want to put in a plug for, we have, I think, very strong controls, very good controls, and especially the local police chiefs being in charge of issuing warrants like FID cards. And I think that could have made a crucial difference there. But I think we do have, close to home, Representative Linsky of Natick has proposed House 3031, which would give at least the ability to temporarily suspend access to a firearm to those who may pose a risk to themselves or others. And I have to confess, I'm not up on all the details of how someone would make that determination, but obviously, if someone's in a certain kind of condition that, you know, and people are aware of it, then there should be a mechanism for removing their access to firearms, at least temporarily. I think that's a gap that we could fill there. So I would suggest that we support that and get in touch with, you know, I intend to talk to our representative, Jack Lewis, about that and help him in his support of that item. So I wanted to make those points. And with that, I'll ask for motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
You're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.